to define this as a permitted accessory use to a dwelling, so it'll be listed in our accessory uses in all of the zoning ordinances where dwelling units are permitted. So as part of this amendment, we do have limitations for short-term rentals. They are listed above, on the screen. And we are proposing a maximum of 180 rental nights per year. The maximum occupancy for any rental is 6, unless the building code requires fewer. And that could be because of square footage or improper egress, or every bedroom, every sleeping area has to have access and the proper size windows to get to the outside in case of an emergency. There could be no more than one rental contract per night. Events will be prohibited, and that will be in the rental contract. Just as an aside, we're listing recreation vehicles cannot be used as a short-term rental. We will be requiring a zoning permit application, and that permit will be valid for 2 years. So the permit requirements, when somebody comes in and applies for it, are going to have to complete this application. We are proposing, as advertised, a $200 application fee. We are asking and seeking a residency requirement, which is you have to demonstrate that you've lived in that dwelling for 7 of the past 12 months. And we're also seeking a contact information for what we're calling an alternate caretaker. So when the operator is not available, there's another person that the lodgers can contact if the operator's unavailable. As part of the application, we'd like to see a site plan or some kind of drawing that shows the house or the dwelling and where the parking is going to be located. I'll get to the parking restrictions in a little while. And as part of the signatures on the application, the operator or the applicant will be required to consent for staff to enter the dwelling if a complaint is founded or is identified. And now it's not only applicable to property owners, but a person who rents the dwelling can also be an operator. So we're not putting any restrictions on that. We do have safety requirements for these. First, a multi-purpose fire extinguisher needs to be at the premises. We are asking that there be interconnected smoke detectors. So that means when you press one, they all go off in the house. I do know that certainly was not a requirement years ago, I think even until the late 80s. So there's several homes in Manassas Park, especially on the west side, that do not comply with this requirement unless they have done upgrades or additions to their house. And if there's any gas appliances, a carbon monoxide detector will be required. And then similar to what I mentioned before, there needs to be direct egress to any of the sleeping areas. So parking restrictions. We all know parking in Manassas Park can be challenging. So we are doing some limitations on the parking. We do have for single family and 2-family dwellings, which are both identified in the zoning ordinance, that you have to have a minimum of 2, and these are off street, so in the driveway, 2 spaces. And furthermore, we're putting a cap on how many vehicles the lodgers can bring to the home during the stay, and that would be a maximum of 2. For a single family, we really don't have any 2-family dwellings in the city, but it is defined in the zoning ordinance. And then for townhouse and multifamily, there's a minimum 1 space, and you can only bring 1 vehicle to either a townhouse or would be condo or apartment building, or apartment unit, excuse me. We do have a list of reasons for revocation. So the permit does allow you to operate, but we do list out in the proposed ordinance those items where we can revoke the permit. And of course, it's failure to comply with the regulations, if there's 2 violations within 1 calendar year, and refusal to cooperate with the city in a complaint investigation, and failure to register or renew the short-term rental permit. I did want to make 2 comments. We did have a public hearing for the Planning Commission on this on August 9th. They did recommend denial of the short-term rental ordinance. The main reason was really a difficult of enforcement of the proposed limitations. I guess in summary, it's easier to just prohibit it outright as opposed to trying to enforce these regulations, which from an enforcement perspective, we would have to diligently pursue that and document that they're not following the regulations. The other issue was that not everybody who's a resident could actually meet the regulations for a short-term rental, given the interconnected fire alarms, and also the perhaps the egress issue. So that was of concern about allowing everybody in the park to have this use. So I did want to also express that the maximum number of nights that you can have the short-term rental, we stated 180. Certainly the governing body can make that decision about how many maximum nights they would like. I know other jurisdictions have, what I've seen, a minimum of 60 days or 60 nights, and then other jurisdictions in the area have no prohibition whatsoever. And then the parking is also another point in discussion about the number of required off-street parking and whether or not you would like to have those maximum number of larger vehicles to go to or be part of that contract or lodging term. That concludes my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mickey. That was an excellent presentation. From my personal perspective, I think that something has to be done. I understand that there are staffing issues and that affects enforcement, but I stopped to make a difference, to make a difference in my mind between difficult to enforce and impossible to enforce. And I know that at some point the staffing levels will go up and we'll be able to more effectively enforce this. And I think just because something's difficult doesn't take away our responsibility to try. But regardless of what direction the governing body wants to take, I don't see this issue getting any better. In fact, I think, personal opinion, I think it's probably going to get worse. So with that, any comments or questions from the governing body? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So to my members of the governing body, earlier this morning, I went and looked on Airbnb, and I searched in February and printed out the houses that I could find. So take a look. You'll see that in some of the houses they're offering multiple times. Question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How many do we have right now throughout the city?
Well, those would be ones operating illegally, so we don't track that, but like you, I have gone on Airbnb and saw units that
If I
are
can
for
add.
rent.
Yeah, so there was 31 listings when I checked last week.
Okay.
That just includes those that are utilizing Airbnb or VRBO, not anyone who's using Facebook or
Turnkey.
just cash transactions. So we really don't know the extent of the problem, but
All right. So we even though we don't, it's not allowed, already exists.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, that is a true
Okay.
statement.
So my other question is, well, it's really a question, but I was looking at Fairfax County's
Mhm.
regulations, and they require, even if you rent, they require you to have a letter from the owner of the property, in addition to the person that's doing the rent, that's partaking in the short-term leasing, to also have some documentation as well. as well as what we have in here, that backup individual. Are we going to require, if someone's, for example, is renting an apartment or renting a townhouse, to also have verification from the owner of the?
Yes, I may have omitted that, but that if they are a renter, they certainly do need the property owner's permission.
Okay,
That is part of the application.
okay. And right now, we're actually not doing any type of enforcement, it just exists, right?
Well, it's prohibited, and we have just recently, because of looking into this and going on the sites with the Planning Commission, public hearing and comments, so we are aware of a few of them. And I have asked some of my enforcement staff to look at the ones that we did see. You'll notice that some of the photos actually show the addresses on the front of the house. So even though they don't pinpoint the actual address on the
You can
site
kinda
until you
guess.
book, you can kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
So we're looking, but we also know that this amendment was going through the process. But we are aware, and to your point, I also noticed that several of them, even though they come up as different units, it seems like the same one are advertised
Yeah.
times.
So if I can just make, I was going to speak before we started here, but we were having technical issues with YouTube. So we have 3 different items tonight, 2 public hearings specifically about short-term rentals, and then 1 later discussion item on rentals overall, and also enforcement of both short-term rentals and long-term rentals. And that's when I'll get in discussions about staffing capacity, because right now, the answer to your question is no. We're too bogged down with trash, inoperable vehicles,
Right.
grass and weeds. You'll hear from Calvin in 2 weeks. Our enforcement has gone up from 250 citations roughly up to about 1,300 this year, Calvin. So it has spiked. We're doing a lot more out there in the community in terms of code enforcement. So this issue, regardless of where you go, I'll discuss later in my agenda, even if you want to prohibit it, which, it sounds like the Planning Commission wanted to, it sounds like some people may want to, we still have to take enforcement action to actually prohibit it. That requires the resources, and that's what I'm going to talk about later on tonight. So if we can maybe skip the staffing discussion until we get to agenda item 9D, because that's when I'll address that.
Okay. I just want to know what we're doing right now, so
Right now, it's reactive, and we don't have the
Right.
bandwidth to go after any of this.
I just figured it's
Yep.
important for folks to realize that. Thank you, those are all my questions.
I just have a couple questions. What are the other jurisdictions in Northern Virginia do? Do they have a permit system?
Yes, I mean, this mimics several of the jurisdictions, kind of taking different ideas from other jurisdictions in the area and combined, but it's fairly similar to all the other ones.
In the general areas right here, how many fully prohibit?
Well, I didn't do a tally, but I did try to look at the city of Fairfax. I could not find that they actually have a short-term rental ordinance. And I don't think Falls Church has one, but I didn't really do that research. I just kind of tried to look for the ones that had it. But I'm happy to look at that and get back to you.
My position is to keep it as is, to prohibit, not to do registration of this. I think we just need to enforce as is and try to look at staffing levels, as you're going to discuss later. So that's my position. Thank you.
Comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'm on the planning commission and I was against this, as Mr. Carrera is. I just wanted to ask and clarify, so let's take the staffing issues out of it. Perfect world, we do have staffing, full staffing. How are we going to enforce this? So how are we gonna make sure that there are 6 people?
Well, we would have to go and investigate and work with the property owner and look at the contracts and identify. We might have to do site investigation and if it's a repeat offender, go out and see how many people are going into the house, as well as identifying the vehicles that would be permitted.
And just to add, so they're based off the next public hearing as well, so there's a couple routes. So we would look at the listings, right, and send notices to those homes that they haven't registered with both the zoning administrator and, for the next public hearing, the commissioner of revenue, as they would be required to if we're going to legalize this from a tax perspective as well. If they don't comply and get a permit through Mickey's office to schedule the inspections of the building inspector, which is what I talk about at the next agenda item, or not the next one, but the further down on the agenda item, they would go out and inspect with the zoning inspector and see that they're complying with all the regulations that Mickey has laid out here. If they don't comply either with Mickey or with Debbie, then also we can go after them from a tax perspective as well from the Commissioner of Revenue's office and utilize our prosecuting attorney to take them to court.
So would we send someone out every night to check, or would this be complaint-based, or how would we even know if they had more than 6 at a time?
Well, the maximum number would probably be one of the more difficult ones to, limitations to document. But if it need be, we would do the site going out in the evenings and see, and you know, counting the people who go in.
And along that same angle, how would we know that the renters are staying less than 30 nights? How are we gonna know that each house is only doing it 180 days out of the year? We would have no way of knowing this unless we had someone checking all of these rentals every single night, telling what's going on.
So theoretically, if they're using Airbnb through the Commissioner of Revenue's Office Tax Authority, they can audit their records and figure out how many nights stay. So Mickey's office would not be able to, but the tax office would. Now, there's questions about, you know, Commissioner of Revenue being independent from, so would we be notified of this? Your guess is good as mine, so.
Yeah. Also, our residency requirements, checking that the person is actually a resident, full-time resident of their home, includes mortgage statement, driver's license, and/or a utility bill, 2 of those things. I can tell you, as someone who wasn't able to sell their home in Charleston, South Carolina for the first 4 years of living here, I had 2 of those. And I could have presented them to you, but I did not step foot in that house for 4 years. So that also doesn't show that people are actually living here. They could be renting it the entire year.
Right, we
So-
you know, we are looking at it from a perspective that people will, you know, do the right thing, if you will, and, you know, trying to obey the regulations as presented, but you're correct.
So in short, my concern, and the reason I'm against this, is that this is gonna put the burden on the neighbors to constantly be calling us and say, my neighbors are doing it again, my neighbors are doing it again. And I don't like having anything be complaint-based, because it's not fair to the people living around them. So that's just my stance.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Vicki, for the presentation. What was the vote of the Planning Commission that rejected your amendments?
So we only had 4 members, it was 3 deny and 1 abstained.
1 abstained.
It was 5.
Was it?
Martha was
Was
still
Martha,
here. Mhm.
excuse me, I'm getting my days confused, thank you.
So 4 no, 1 abstain.
Yes, correct. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm going to reserve my judgment. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I think it's important that staffing be discussed because I don't see us implementing any of this. It's going on now, currently. We need staff to enforce it, whether we're doing it with a policy or we're not. So I'm going to wait and see what the city manager has to say about staffing and when that can be brought on and how soon that can be brought on before I make any judgment. I do think the safety issues that you bring out are very important. It's important for homes to have smoke detectors and to have monoxide detectors as well. And if we can then check those on an annual basis, to me that brings a level of safety that does not exist today in these Airbnb, and I'm very concerned about that. A lot of lives are lost because of carbon monoxide. So I'm also interested in your parking regulations that you've put forth to help reduce the number of, we'll say, illegal parkings in the neighborhood. But again, I'm going to wait and see what the city manager has to say about staffing. So thank you, Mickey,
Yeah,
for your
you're welcome.
presentation.
And I just want to, that's a great point about health and safety.
Yeah,
This
important.
provides you that opportunity, whereas if you just outright ban it, we'll be able to get the people who do Airbnb and VRBO, but more people are going to go black market or underground and just do it that way. So you're not going to have any inspection regimes. The hope is that if you have some kind of regulations, and people would want to utilize Airbnb, VRBO, and then we'd be able to actually inspect for at least to ensure that the building is safer.
Yeah,
Mhm.
good argument to me.
Yeah, I agree with all of Councilmember Moore's remarks about safety. I think that's extremely important. I'm also concerned about the safety of the children playing in the neighborhood, as you pointed out earlier when you came to the microphone. If there's a constant churn of people going through the neighborhood, we just don't know. We don't know. So, thank you. Do you have yes, go ahead.
Hey, good evening, Mickey. Couple of things. The 180 calendar days, is that consecutive or spread out throughout the year?
It's, yeah, they're definitely not consecutive. It's that many throughout the calendar year.
So spread throughout. I think there should be a verbiage in there to have a cap on the consecutive days. Usually it's like 90.
Well,
90 days
it's
consecutive.
defined in the short-term rental definition that it can be no more than 30 days
Okay, that's fine.
for no more
Right.
than 30
30
consecutive
consecutive
days,
days.
correct.
And then, what's the thoughts of capping the number of permits issued each year? So we don't have 50 people trying to register for short-term rentals. Instead, say, hey, the city is only giving out 25. The other people are on the wait list. So it basically doesn't burden the city, the neighborhoods all at once, and something to consider. I don't know if that could be done.
I would have to defer to Dean on that. From a zoning ordinance perspective, we have to treat like activities the same, and to put a cap on it would limit people who could meet the requirements from allowing that use. But certainly, I think that's a legal question that hopefully Dean can answer.
Okay.
I mean, I can chime in real quickly.
Okay.
So the idea is that if you'd have some sort of a lottery, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, so the other question is Airbnb, they stepped up their game because a lot of cities were complaining, and there's a lot of restrictions and protocols they use now. And, to register a house on Airbnb, you actually have to take a picture of a fire extinguisher before they could put a live listing on their site. So there's a lot of things. And also, on a comment, they won't do consecutive days more than 45 days, or they're offline again. So they do have some protocols in place, because they understand the cities can't manage it, and they're complaining, so they stepped up some of the regulations there. Even verbal VRBO does that too. Banning short-term rentals in the whole city, I don't know how we could do that. Legally, it doesn't make sense. Personally, I have a rental. One of them is a short-term, but I use it for, traveling nurses. They travel around, and, they come, they stay for 2-3 months, work in the hospital, and they're out. So I could see both sides of the argument, that it does affect the city's quiet enjoyment and all that. But, there's got to be ways where you can put limits and restrictions on, and the registration part for the commissioner, So I think that would curb some of the issues that people are having. And that's it. I mean, I don't have any other questions. It was just, I guess I'm gonna wait for the next public hearing to answer some of the other stuff.
Okay. Follow-up?
One
Yes.
quick question, and this might be for Laszlo or Dean. For individuals that are operating short-term rentals in their homes, are they considered a business?
I don't think they're considered a business because businesses are not allowed in residential districts, right? They would need a home occupation permit for that.
Well, my personal opinion is the zoning permit would be
Like a home
akin
occupation
to
permit.
the
Okay.
home occupation for short-term rental.
Okay.
Because we don't
Yes.
list it as a home occupation, identified as a home occupation. So the zoning permit would be that permit. And
Okay,
now they'd have to register with the Commissioner of Revenue.
okay, thank you, that's what I needed to know.
But you can have a business license at your home address.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Any last questions or comments?
Yeah, no, if they have a rental, technically it would be, you can get a business license, right? You need a business license?
A business like.
Even if it's
what
not a
type
short-term
of-
rental, if it's a long-term rental too.
Oh, you mean if you're renting your property?
Right.
I don't believe so.
I don't believe you
That's
need
out
a
of
beep. The only time you would need a beeple, from my understanding, is if you're using a company to manage your rentals, that company then would be subject to the business
Right,
license
LLC.
requirements. Yeah.
'Cause a lot of these other jurisdictions that have rental licenses also require business permits. So
That's-
it's something to
yeah.
look at into. I mean,
Yeah, we can certainly look into it, but the only time I could see that happening again is if you have a company the company itself is managing these rentals.
Okay.
They would be the ones that would have to pay get the business license.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay. If there are no more governing body questions, is there anyone in the audience who would like to make public comment on this particular topic? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying.
Can you
What
come
I-
closer to the microphone? Yeah.
I understand what you're saying about the short-term rentals, but what I don't understand is if we have it going on illegally now and nothing is being done, what makes you think you can take care of it when you make it legal?
No, we don't believe we can. That's why we have the agenda item 9D. Yeah.
Because to me, if you know people are doing it now and it's illegal, when it's legal, how are you gonna police it when it's not even being policed now? It's just baffling me.
Oh, that's why we have to
Yeah.
have the staffing discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Anyone else would like to? Yes, ma'am. Oh.
Hey,
Okay.
Jimmy
Sir.
Nguyen, 9302 Bradley Court. I'd just like to ask if you have any sort of comparative analysis of other jurisdictions that are doing this and what the pros are versus the cons. What issues are they actually dealing with, right? So I'd like to hear more facts about like were their crime rates actually increasing, right? Are kids actually getting hit on the street? I mean, these are all kind of theoretical and anecdotal, right? I would like some facts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Wine. I live at 8526 Sandstone Way, and I didn't think I needed to talk on this subject, but it's exactly what's happened in my community, and it's been the demise of my community. Every rental property in my neighborhood has been leased by the tenant. And those pictures that you have today are just a very small portion of what's happened to my neighborhood. Every week, I haul trash to the dump on non-trash days. And my $15,000 a year community cost for my 137 townhouses has gone to $30,000 with the change in our trash code where the trash company no longer picks up trash off of the ground. It has to be in a toter. My neighborhood is also infested with rats because my community has lost the family unit. We are a neighborhood full of flop houses. My community, I've lived there for 40 years. I bought that house when it was a field. I love this neighborhood and I love this town, but my community is a dump. Every house that's there that has many residents living in it, and when I say multiple, I mean 10, 15, 10 cars. I can go door to door and deliver the trash code, those Spanish and English packets, the 4-page. I delivered them to everyone. 3 weeks later, it's a whole new group of people. So my effort, I'm almost 70 years old and I've worked really hard in my community to save it. And I can't. It is turned into a dump. I need code enforcement to help. I need the city to help. I need you guys to enforce the law. I need you to spend time in my neighborhood. I need the owners of the house to feel the burn. And the only thing that's gonna do is hit them in their pocket. I would dig through trash every day to identify the people who are putting trash out to solve the problems. I get them trash cans, I put their address on it. I do everything that I can, but I can't solve the problem of this rotating pile of people in and out of my community.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? Okay, seeing no one and hearing no one, do we have a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. The next public hearing, the topic is regarding an ordinance for short-term rental registry. I declare the public hearing open.
All right, good evening, Mayor and members of the governing body. This is just a follow-up ordinance amendment. If you do establish that these are legal and regulated, they would also need to be registered with the Commissioner of Revenue for paying taxes. Technically, they have to pay taxes now, even though they're illegal. So this cleans it up if we regulate them, saying now they're legal and they have to pay taxes as well. That's all this does is require registration with the Commissioner of Revenue. They pay a $50 fee. They have a $500 per violation fee for not registering, and that could be assessed each rental day that they are not registered with the city. So those are pretty aggressive fines if we do take them to court for failure to comply with tax law and to register with the Commissioner of Revenue. This isn't about revenue generation. At the most, from a tax perspective, I could see is probably around $6,000 from the legal short-term rentals. I can't speak about the illegal ones. Those are harder to track without the team to go out there and do the investigation. So it's not really about revenue generation. It's just more about tax compliance and tax fairness. If one business is going to pay taxes or residents are going to pay taxes, then they should also be paying taxes as well.
The fairness issue,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay.
And
Comments?
Mayor, can I also chime in on this?
Yes, thank you.
So this was drafted primarily just so we have a rental or a list of these Airbnb type rentals. It doesn't change anything at all about whether or not they are legal or whether or not they have to pay taxes. Right now, they have to pay taxes, even though legally they're not supposed to be operating in the city. They do meet the definition for lodging, or for the temporary lodging, and they meet the definition of a hotel per that particular code, the tax code. So this is trying to bring it, get a list so we can, one, make sure that all of them have the necessary permit, if you approve that as well, which is the zoning component. So there's a lot of different aspects of this. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Okay, thank you. That was City Attorney. Thank you.
Before we
Yes.
begin our next one, I'll make another note, is that a lot of these short-term rentals, it's probably a good point, can't operate in residential zones. So what Prince William County does is that if you have a short-term rental, you need to be zoned in either office or commercial areas. So that's something, you can look at too, like you can designate which area in the city, so it doesn't impact the neighborhoods, and maybe bring it more closer to the the commercial or office side.
Okay.
Steve, that is the case right now already. You're correct. The only places these are legal are in the business districts where you can have hotels.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Any
You're
other
welcome.
comments or questions?
Just really quick.
Yes, ma'am.
How did we come up with the $50 for the registration fee?
Dean, was that state law?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, the $50 is just, I believe it's state law. It may have been something we just took from another jurisdiction, but the $50 is basically to cover the cost of for staff time to process this and to maintain the list.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Comments or questions?
You're welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So the short-term rentals that exist illegally now, who are sending in their tax payments, are we responding to them in the mail, perhaps, saying that what they're doing is illegal?
Again, we don't get those. The Commissioner of Revenue gets those.
Okay, so we have no way of responding to them.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Mr. Dewan made some interesting points about data and facts that I'd like, before we move further on this idea. We're not going to vote on it tonight, which is normally our practice for something that we're having a public hearing on. But before we vote, I'd like to see some data. In those areas that do have Airbnbs, what are the safety violations, the traffic? What are armed robbery, crime? Is it higher in those areas? If we can gather that statistic from some of the areas that have it, that would be helpful for me, because right now, it seems anecdotal, and I'd like to get it more concrete.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. It'll just take some time to research. I wanted to see first, though, is this going to be outright just destroyed and not spend staff time doing additional research? But if it's actually going to be considered, then we'd want to take that step as well.
I think maybe when we do that, we should check out Miss Wine's neighborhood. I mean, that's right here in Manassas Park. We could get some statistics of how many of those are short-term rentals and the problems that she's brought to light.
So how many Airbnb and VRBO?
Absolutely, or
Okay.
otherwise, yeah.
So I can tell you right now, the majority, 48%, are east of Digital Drive. So just statistically, if there's more, then you would expect more crime there. I don't think that's been the case. We'll actually have a police report today. I'll look more deeply into the pockets, but I have not seen that on that part of the city. I've seen the crime actually in other parts of the city. So where you have 48% of Airbnbs is actually safer than other part. But that's just Airbnbs. I can't speak. Those could be a lot of illegal or not illegal, but non-Airbnb VRBO short-term rentals that we have no insight into. It could be that there's a higher percentage of those in that community, and that could be contributed. So it's not just easy as that to kind of get the data. But just from that simple question, looking at our city, the answer is no. It does. It's not correlated with crime. But then you got to talk about causality as well. So it's a totally different issue. But we can look at other jurisdictions and just start looking at that data as well.
Or perhaps we should find out where they're posting their rentals.
Whom?
Perhaps we should find out where they're posting their rentals.
Sure.
Okay. Councilmember Moore, did you?
Well, yeah, just, I forgot what I was going to say. So hold on. I'll come back to that.
So to level set, though, this is about a registry, whether or not, no matter what we decide, that we put together a registry. Correct?
I mean, technically, yes. I think if you're going to prohibit it, then we shouldn't even have the registry. We shouldn't be going after the taxes. I get it that they should be paying that. We should be going after them and shutting them down. But again, to do that, again, agenda item 90. That's to your point. You say, let's find out who they are. Well, then agenda item 90. Let's talk about staffing to figure out where they are.
Yeah.
But
Any follow-ups or anything?
Just really quick, I know from the west side, we do have an issue with short-term disabilities, not disabilities, but short-term rentals, based on what people see, based on the number of cars that change in a neighborhood. So that does exist. It's just, to the city staff's point, it's just kind of under the radar at the moment. And that does bring other issues of safety, which our Councilmember Moore pointed out.
Just to clarify, under the regulations, we would be able to ban parties, weddings, large gatherings at these short-term rentals, is that correct? For the zoning, yes.
Yes, that is one of the limitations. It has to be in the contract that they present to the lodgers, as well as acknowledge it when they submit the zoning permit as an application to be a short-term rental. So that's absolutely one of the requirements.
Okay, thank you, Mickey.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, that's it, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Javed, did you have a question?
yeah, because I think there's essentially two issues here. There's an Airbnb issue and there's actually a short-term rental issue. Two are totally separate than the other one. Airbnb basically acts as a, bed and breakfast type of business, paying taxes, and I think you need to, register with the commissioner, get a business license, all that. Now, short-term rental is, okay, owner is renting out the house for 6 months.
Could
Not
be shorter.
or shorter,
Yeah.
and now registering for the Airbnb. And so if we want to do a ban on Airbnb, okay, but you can't ban short-term rentals though, right? I mean,
That's what we'd be saying. We
Yeah.
wouldn't allow that to happen. So now policing it, it's much more difficult.
allow
Right.
what to happen, the Airbnb or the short-term?
Short-term rentals
At all?
at all. Yeah.
I don't know about that.
But I mean, when I looked at Fairfax County, they considered short-term rentals, and they said, for example, Airbnb, I think it's turnkey. VRBO. So short-term, my understanding, short-term rental is just a high level definition, and underneath of it, you've got the spokes, whether that's individual and the different companies through which people offer their homes.
Well, I'm just saying, like, okay, Airbnb is defined as
A short-term rental.
short-term rental, but also like I was gonna say, the term again, bed and breakfast, or a hotel, right? You cannot open one of those establishments in a residential area.
Right, you can't open it, you can't have a hotel.
You can't have a hotel in a
Right.
residential, you can't have a bed and breakfast, therefore you cannot have an Airbnb in a residential area. So all these people operating Airbnbs right now, currently in a residential zone, are in a zoning violation.
Well, that's also, right now, technically, we don't allow short-term rentals.
Period.
Yeah, no matter what shape or form they're at.
Okay. Any follow-up from anyone? No? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make public comment on this topic? Okay, seeing no one and hearing no one, do we have a motion to close?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, 5A is a resolution in support of maintaining temporary protected status and creating a path to permanent residency for TPS holders. And the resolution reads, whereas the city of Manassas Park is a community that welcomes immigrants and refugees escaping from war and natural disasters, and whereas Manassas Park values and respects immigrants and refugees and appreciates their contributions to our city and to the nation, and whereas the Manassas Park values and supports the family unit and acknowledges a universal human right for families to remain united without fear of separation, and whereas the Temporary Protected Status TPS program was created by the U.S. Congress in 1990 to allow migrants from countries determined by the executive branch to be unsafe, the right to temporarily live and work in the United States, providing they meet specific requirements without the risk of deportation. And whereas an estimated 610,630 people in the United States hold TPS from 16 designated countries, with El Salvador, Honduras, and Haiti accounting for 92% of all TPS holders. And whereas approximately 24,090 TPS holders reside in Virginia, and over 20,000 U.S.-born children living in Virginia have at least one parent who is a TPS holder. And whereas TPS holders contribute approximately $12.8 billion to the nation's economy, and at least $628 million to Virginia's economy. Now therefore be it resolved that the governing body of the city of Manassas Park recognizes the precarious position of TPS holders in our society and calls attention to all Manassas Park residents the contributions of TPS holders in Virginia and across the United States. Be it further resolved that the governing body of the city of Manassas Park urges a concerted effort on the national level to maintain TPS status for all beneficiaries in the short term and to devise a path to permanent residency in the long term. The recommended motion is that the governing body adopt a resolution in support of maintaining temporary protected status and creating a path to permanent residency for TPS holders as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. And I want to thank Councilmember Amaya for making the contacts that provided the information that enabled the creation of this resolution. Now we have with us this evening Mr. Arnaldo Diaz. We invite you to come to the microphones, sir, and say a few words, and to also, if you'd like to introduce some of the folks who are with you this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Rachel, council members. Thank you very much for all your support. I like to actually give this opportunity to Amado Marroquin. He is actually a member of, actually a he lives in your community. He's a TPS holder. And I will prefer that he addresses
Yes.
all of you in our community.
Yes.
Amado?
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to start by saying that it's unbelievable for me to be here. If anybody would have asked me a month ago if this was possible, I wouldn't believe it. Thank you. And I guess thanks to you all, first of all, but mostly Jessie Amaya, that I think she's been working really hard to make it happen. I have my notes here. I'm a TPS holder since 2001. By having the work permit, the TPS has allowed me to work legally, to drive legally, to have a family. So it's been, for the last 4 years, it's been really rough because they tried to stop the TPS to all of us. And we've been struggling. We had hard times trying to renew this thing. It's been rough. But luckily, because of people like you guys that are helping us, we got it for another 2 years. I also want to tell you guys that it not just helps us, it helps our family, our people, okay? I also want to say that the support that you guys are doing is great. It's very, very helpful. I want to talk about myself. I came here in 2000, and on 2021, I'm sorry, in 2001, I had the opportunity to have the work permit. With that, I went to school. With that, I learned a trade. I'm a welder for trade. I can do pipe welding. I also became a business owner. Since 2013, I had a company for welding. I have people working, between 13 to 15 people working the whole time. It's been great. So I want to tell you guys that we try to do good. We try to work hard, and I want to, once again, I want to appreciate you guys for supporting the TPS community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and you're all welcome to stay with us for the rest of the evening, but we understand if you have other things to do, so that the choice is yours.
I would appreciate it. And hopefully we'll continue to lobby with us.
The microphone?
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
thank you.
Once again, just thank you, and I hope that we can all continue to work together towards a path to permanent residency for the TPS families, and help us to talk to our sister cities to take the same position and make resolutions just like yourself have to support our TPS families and find a path to permanent residency in Congress. So thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Oh, would you like to? Yeah.
I can say one.
Did you want to take a picture?
Did you want to take a picture?
Do you have a resolution?
Yes? Do we have a resolution?
No, we don't. The resolution will be numbered and it will be mailed to you. Okay. I think the entire governing body should go down and have a photograph since the
I
vote
think
was
we'll have
unanimous.
space. Maybe we can stand up in the back.
Maybe we can stand up maybe in the back.
We have a lot of
You want us to stand up back here or
Yeah,
down
it's
there?
probably better we stand back so everybody can be.
Come down here. You guys stand there. The two
come
of
in the
you,
back.
and we'll stand here in the back.
Let's move the chairs.
Maybe a big
Thank you.
Oh, look at this. This is good.
As I say, we got a lot of
The
people.
good thing we're up here, yeah.
We have to do in layers. Someone's got to be in the front.
Come around the
Yeah, no one knows how to put it back.
Get in the front. Some people get in the front.
Yeah, people
Sit in the front.
stuck in the front.
The kids can sit in the front. Come on, sit in the front. Sit in the front, kids.
Nancy, how do you say squeeze? Nancy, how do you say squeeze?
Yessie, they're taking pictures, turn around.
Sure.
Yessie, they're getting the back of your face.
Oh, sorry. Say USA.
Manassas Park. Manassas Park.
Thank you so much.
The official city one.
Please Photoshop my belly.
They can Photoshop that. We'll give you a six-pack. Give us all six packs.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. So interesting, the disposition of the Airbnb issue.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate coming up.
You're welcome. I'm the granddaughter. I'm the granddaughter of immigrants, so I understand. Have a good evening.
Oh, thanks for coming out.
Amado?
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's true.
Okay, moving on to 6A.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
A resident, yeah. Appreciate your taxes.
Okay, moving on to 6A, update on the farmer's market and last Friday's events.
Yeah.
Here, it's just up here. Can we get it on all the screen?
Yep. Is this more normal?
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, Mayor, members of the governing body, Mr. Parico, City Manager, and Dean, the City Attorney.
Can you
So-
direct the microphone?
Sorry,
more
I'm.
Directional.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we have started our farmers market on the plaza on September 6th. And I am here to give you an update on that. And the last Friday, that started on August 25th. So for the last Friday, we had what is Bands, Bites, and Beer for August 25th, last Friday. That was 6 to 9 p.m. Our drink hosts were Tucked Away Brewery and KO Distillery. We had food trucks of the G-Dunk and GB's Grill. Our band was Revel Without a Cause. And our sponsors were La Finca and Faux Sopa. The customer count for that whole evening was about 213 people that came out for this event. And this was our first event. vendors and customers, I went around and talked as well as taking pictures and doing the live feed. And Tucked Away, when I got them to sign up, Tucked Away was not sure they wanted to actually commit to all of the ones for the rest of the year until they did this one. And when I talked to him, he said, for a first ever event, the turnout is great, better than a long-standing events that he has been to. We have had more people, and he was excited to go ahead and sign up for the rest of the events for the rest of the year, and hopefully be a part of the ones next year. KO Distillery, he was so excited, he really actually didn't have enough. Both of them had to go back and get more, so that was good. It was well received by a lot of people. A lot of the customers were very happy with it. They loved the atmosphere, the vibe. They enjoyed the music. Somebody actually celebrated their birthday that night.
Yes.
We also had some people who were looking forward to the next one, and some actually made comment to the first Fridays over in the city of Manassas and the length of time it took to get drinks, 45 minutes plus, and food, and they actually enjoyed the closed-in atmosphere that we were having on the plaza. So they really enjoyed it. Plus, it was beautiful at night. The plaza is absolutely stunning at nighttime. So it was very well received by everybody coming out for the very first event on the plaza in the evenings, which is first of very many that we'll be having. For the farmers market, this one opened on September 6th. The farmers market is 3 to 7 p.m. We started off with 27 vendors. Right now we have 47 vendors. This is going to be our third Wednesday. We have 47 vendors. Customer count was 202 on the first day. It was 278 the second Wednesday, which was last Wednesday, with customers coming more often. We went through a temperature of 102 degrees on our first day. The vendors were troopers. The people who came out were also troopers, enjoyed it. Despite the heat, they were having fun. The splash pad got massively used by everybody, including the vendors. Facebook page, last 28 days we had 123 followers. We were up to 147 followers. The new page likes was 86, post engagement 310. On the first farmers market opening, I had 11 new vendors come up to me wanting to sign up. Vendors and customer feedback. Well, Chris Dotson is a pretty big vendor over at the City of Manassas Farmers Market, and he was anxious to come over to this one. And he said that this market is definitely going to grow. They do a lot of markets, so when he told me that, I felt like, yes, this is really going to grow. I had some of my vendors that made their money back that first day for their fee plus profit. That was astounding to them. That's never happened. I've had many sell out. Great Harvest actually had to go back and get more product and bring it up only after 3 hours of being open. So he was pretty well received by everybody as well. A lot of the customers were saying it was great for the community. I had a few that had been here for 38 years talk to me, 40-some years talk to me, and they were really excited about having a farmer's market back and excited that it's every Wednesday. The Facebook interactions has all been pretty positive. I haven't seen anything negative. If they're saying anything negative, it's not on our Facebook page. But everybody seems to really be excited about this farmers market, and they're actually looking forward to us having a Saturday market next year. So with that, as you see, I have a Facebook thing. We are actually engaging with all the way out to West Springfield. Is engaging with us. Nokesville, Bristow, Culpeper. People in Culpeper are actually engaging in our Facebook farmers market page and watching our farmers market. Haven't actually talked to people to see where they're coming from though. So going forward, last Fridays is going great. I think they're just going to get better and better and better and bigger and bigger. The next one we have coming up is at the end of September. It's September 29th, and it's our last Friday kicking off to the Latino Festival. This is a pretty big last Friday event. DJ, performers, dancers, possibly singers. We have a lot of food vendors, enough to handle a crowd. We have KO Distillery, Paradise Springs Winery, which is in Clifton, coming out. Preston Pub up the road has decided that he wants to be a part of our last Friday, so we're working with him on his ABC license to come out. And we have Tucked Away Brewery also coming out, so they're providing the drinks. I also have mild drink vendors that are going to be there. So it's more food and drink vendors than it was for the first one. Just predicting the crowd's going to be quite large for that event. And then going forward, we're going to start our first one for 2024 in January, and it's called the Snack Down. That is going to be a kickoff to your football Super Bowl when that happens. So that's going to be our last Friday for 2024. Our last Friday will be in October. November falls on Black Friday. I don't think we're going to see much then. For farmers market, we're only in our third day this Wednesday, and like I said, we're at 47 vendors, and I still have 4 more that will be starting next Wednesday. So it's growing. We have gotten permission to close off the road to push it out more so we can add more vendors. So we are adding more vendors. They are coming. Vendors talk, and they're contacting me pretty much daily. I also have drop-in vendors that fill my full-time vendor spots, so we have no gaps at all in that market, so it always looks full. We are looking at starting the Saturday one next year. That one's already got about 80 vendors wanting to sign up, and that's not yet complete. So once they all find out, I'm probably looking at 100 and some vendors starting that off. Looking for that to take place down at the VRE lot once we get permission from Mr. Dalton from VRE. I'm looking at an increase in customer attendance to quickly grow from 70 and 80%. Once the community continually sees this market growing, you're going to see an impact of customers coming through. They just need to get used to it, being there every Wednesday, and then you'll see the customers constantly coming through. Even more customers talk also. They'll talk to other people. They even will go up to other markets and say, you need to come out to Manassas Park. That's happened before. So, some of the vendors are looking for a winter market on the plaza. Don't cringe. A lot of the vendors are used to the cold. They will sit out in the cold. It does bring money. People do go to the winter market. They enjoy it. It's usually food and crafts and other things. It's not produce. There is no produce in the winter. Our produce vendors are pretty much off in warm climates, enjoying their break before they plant again. So they are looking for a winter market. So we'll see how that plays out for them. Pretty much that's all I have for projections. The goals, I'm looking at an increased growth from 2023 by 70% in 2024. Maintaining the growth and gaining interest in sponsorships. I am working on a sponsorship, as you heard. I did get some sponsors for our last Friday to sponsor the band. So they took care of paying for our band, so that was not anything we had to do. Build a desire, want to be here. That's what I want vendors and customers to feel like they really want to come here. I've had customers tell me they prefer to put their money here, so they want to support these events. Added priorities, we want to improve our social media presence, which we're doing. I think we've all gotten quite well at that. Gain awareness with vendors and bring more visitors to Park Central, which that's happening. Vendors are talking to other vendors. I get emails and phone calls every day for the farmers market. So it's happening. And working with Yezi and Yvette for the last Friday in September, I've gotten a lot of vendors with that too, and also interested in the other events that we're doing. So it's a lot of cross-promoting here that works well. Increasing the revenue to the city, these events will do that. As they get growing, it's going to be constant money coming in, especially with the drop-in vendors. This is going to be a weekly revenue from drop-in vendors that will never stop until the market is over. Visitors will increase also. I've seen that from running the market at the city of Manassas. I've seen the visitors go from 1,000, 1,400 to 4,000, almost 5,000 on a Saturday. And that's just from growing the market with the vendors. The more vendors you have, the more they want to come. So that's the goal. And in closing, these two events have gotten positive feedback from the community and the vendors participating in the events. We are creating excitement within the community as well as outside the community. And as one of the 38-year residents said, this is what the community needs. So, yay.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. These are wonderful events for the community. Thank you. Comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
So the way, I know it just disappeared, right?
Yeah, I did.
It got
I
dark.
don't know what I did.
So looking at everything, it looks like we're, for 11 of the 12 months, we're gonna have something in the downtown always, some shape or form.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, so from January, next year in 2024, from January through to end of October, you will have your last Fridays. You will have your farmer's market. Your farmer's market will always be every Wednesday, starting in April. It'll be April 10th. The Saturday market, should that approval come through, would be April also, all the way through to November. So you're going to have 2 farmers markets going on throughout the year, and you're going to have the last Fridays going on throughout the year.
Okay, thank you. And honestly, I'd rather come down here than drive somewhere to go to the farmer's market. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments, concerns or criticisms? I'll take those too.
No, you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just want to say we're very lucky to have you. All three, I went to the last Friday and the 2 farmers markets, and even though it was 102 degrees, all 3 events were fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also your yoga classes on Wednesdays are picking up right here.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, we do have Zumba tomorrow.
Zumba
Yeah.
or yoga,
Mhm. Yeah, we do have the workout Wednesdays. That ends in October as well.
Okay.
But those have actually taken off quite well as you started off with decent, and then it's just been growing. The last yoga class we had, which is the second yoga class we've had on the plaza, it wasn't the same people from the first one.
Okay.
So that was nice to know that these are all new people coming.
Good.
So yeah, each one is growing. It takes a little bit of time, but they're going to get there.
Mhm.
They're good events to have.
Okay.
Yoga tomorrow?
Follow
Yeah,
up?
let's go.
Zumba. It's Zumba tomorrow.
Does anybody have follow
Oh,
up?
Zumba. No.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to consent agenda. Consent agenda consists of
Oh.
approval of the minutes of September 12th, 2023, approval by the governing body and authorization for city manager to sign an agreement with Physio Control Incorporated for the purchase and maintenance of cardiac monitors, chest compressors for the Department of Fire and Rescue as presented and subject to final review by city attorney. Approval and adoption of a resolution in support of the 2023 VDOT Revenue Sharing and Transportation Alternatives applications as presented and subject to final review by city attorney. Approval of an authorization for the mayor and the city manager to sign the FY23 audit engagement letter from Robinson Farmer Cox and Associates in an amount not to exceed $65,415 as presented and subject to final review by city attorney. Approval of an appropriation of $26,914,142 to the city for Q2 of the fiscal year 2024, and approval of an appropriation of $248,071 to the city schools for Q2 of the fiscal year 2024. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, over here. I
Yes.
got a question on 7D, if I may.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Do we add the school last time? Or is that something new? The
For appropriations?
yeah,
It-
the audit engagement.
Oh, the schools always fall under
They
our
were
audits.
always-
Yes.
okay.
Uh-huh.
Follow-up?
No, that's
No,
just one.
okay. Okay, 9A is hazard mitigation plan.
Mitigation.
What is it?
Madam Mayor, council members, can you all hear me okay? Thank you for allowing me to present tonight. Let me adjust this. Okay, we're going to talk about the hazard mitigation plan. The hazard mitigation plan is something that was adopted and every 5 years, and it's required for future funding from FEMA for both pre- and post-disaster grant programs. The City of Manassas Park, we're in the Northern Virginia planning area. We have participated in the planning process. Staff from the fire department and the city manager's office participated, and there was public participation, including posting on the city's website and on Facebook in August of 2022. The Virginia Department of Emergency Management and FEMA reviewed the hazmat, and have approved it contingent upon adoption by the participating governing bodies of all the jurisdictions, not just ours. This contingent approval was obtained in February of 2023. So mitigation is one of 4 phases of emergency management and one of 5 missions outlined by FEMA. The mitigation is defined as risk management actions taken to avoid, reduce, or transfer risks posed by threats and hazards to people and their property. Mitigation plan sets forth our aspirations and the specific courses of actions we will take to reduce the vulnerability and exposure to future hazards. Hazard mitigation plan has certain requirements. The Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 requires that local governments develop and adopt natural hazard mitigation plans in order to be eligible for funding under the pre-disaster and hazard mitigation grant programs. The Northern Virginia Hazard Mitigation Plan went through a whole process. There were 21 counties, independent cities, and participating unincorporated towns met from January 21 through February 23 to review and update the multi-jurisdictional hazmat plan, which also includes specific local mitigation actions plans for each jurisdiction. The planning process was overseen by the Northern Virginia emergency managers. The stakeholders were asked to provide insight on how the agencies or organizations can be engaged in the mitigation and planning efforts, along with input and information on the hazards facing each jurisdiction and the region as a whole. Once the plan draft was completed and approved by all jurisdictions, the VDEM and the Federal Emergency Management Agency reviewed all the final documentation. As I said, preliminary approval was given in February. So, as you can see from this graph, the foundation of the hazard is a hazard risk assessment. And you can see from this graph, and I'm not going to go over it in detail, what the risk assessment is for us. There were 11 natural and 7 non-natural hazards in the Nova and Manassas Park area. Of these, 6 were determined to present a high risk, 7 a medium risk, and 5 a low risk. So once we have the risk, we have to figure out our capabilities. And so we did a capabilities assessment. There's 5 different capabilities. One is planning and regulatory, and that is the implementation of ordinances, policies, site plans, laws, and such, related to guiding and managing growth and development. We said that we ranked ourselves highly capable in this. We have identified the potential hazards, and when we do a capital improvement plan, a local emergency operation plan, and a continuity of operations plan, we take into account these local hazards. As far as administration and technical, where we ranked ourselves as moderately capable, with city staff, and we looked at the city staff and our skills and tools that can be used for mitigation planning and to implement specific mitigation actions. We have qualified, knowledgeable staff who are aware of potential community hazards, but the reason we said we're moderate is because we feel that we could have more staffing as required to thoroughly execute our mission strategies. And this could be achieved by providing hazard training, additional hazard training for current staff and for new staff as they come on board. Safe growth, we feel we're highly capable there. The city's comprehensive plan provides adequate space for expected growth and is used to guide growth in safe locations. The city has adopted an evacuation and shelter plan to deal with emergencies from natural hazards. Building codes provide provisions to alleviate construction and issues of natural hazards. and the city has a well-established safe growth, regulatory, and enforcement capabilities to limit or prevent inappropriate development in identified hazard areas. The remaining two are financial, which relates to the resources that a jurisdiction has access to or is eligible to use for flood mitigation actions. We feel there we're moderately capable. The city has used CRP funding, fees from utilities, stormwater services, state and federal funding, and grant programs to pay for previous mitigation actions. And we should continue to use these methods and seek additional resources as available to fund current and future mitigation actions. And finally, education outreach. Again, we consider ourselves moderately capable. This is programs and methods that are used to implement mitigation activities and communicate hazard-related information. We do a lot of this currently. We educate our local residents through CERT, public events, preparedness fairs, fire department open houses, things like that, social media postings, which we do regularly, and safety-related school programs. However, we say we're moderate because there's always more you can do to prepare people. So, more events are always needed to keep people prepared. So plan maintenance, what do we have to do? Annual plan maintenance, we meet as a planning team. We have to produce an annual report that updates all mitigation actions and provides a summary of changes if any hazards have changed. This is submitted annually to the Northern Virginia HMP project team, and they go over it also. And we'll continue to partner with all the participating jurisdictions around us and the regional entities to plan and identify hazard mitigation opportunities that reduce risks to the hazards identified in this plan. So there is a legal requirement. And the legal requirement is that the governing body, you all, is required to approve this plan in order to convert FEMA's conditional approval, which you got in February, to final approval of the Northern Virginia Hazardous Mitigation Plan, the HAZMIT. This plan will expire 5 years from the date of FEMA's approval letter for the mitigation plan. In the meantime, that 5 years, we have to, by adopting the plan, we will maintain our jurisdictional eligibility for federal post-disaster funding. Hopefully there won't be any disasters, but if there is, it allows us to ask for reimbursement and ask for funding. And that's all.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you, Francis. Any comments or questions?
Pretty straightforward.
Nope.
Yeah. Councilmember Carrera, you
No, I'm
look like
good.
you might have one.
No, very good presentation. Thank you.
Councilmember Lund, comments or questions?
No, thank you, Francis.
Thank
I
you.
just got one question.
Yep.
So if we adopt this plan that's from the Northern Virginia hazmat resolution plan,
Yeah.
so is there any requirements that financially that the city needs to do within to uphold that plan?
Or no, I mean, there's no budget, we have to do annual reports and things like that, so there's
Right.
time that me and Sarah and other people who are working on this will put into it, but there's no funding requirement.
Okay. And I would say if there's a flood or a natural disaster happens, what is the mitigation plan? Do we have one for the city?
Yes. Yeah, so for flooding, really the biggest risk that I've seen in my time here and talking historically is really windstorms. That's the biggest threat. So we kind of have a similar kind of operation when that happens. We're really tracking power lines and trees.
Yeah.
We mobilize public works, police, and fire to really help secure areas where that happens. Police does a great job in public works and communicating with NOVEC. NOVEC's our biggest partner for those issues because the biggest thing you're really going to see is power outages. So that's really the important part. For flooding, a lot of it has to be preventative, right? So we'll have early warning with, you get the text, which some people get angry at us when you get the landline calls about from the National Weather Service about upcoming potential events. Francis is linked in with the National Weather Service, so he joins calls regularly with them to get updates on what's happening with that. And we're taking more preventative measures. Alan Rowley is going to be presenting here in a few months. Remember the Bowman study that we talked about over a year ago about evaluating kind of the improvement in flood mitigation in terms of expanding pipes and everything else. So we're going to talk about flooding a little bit more in about a month or so, and we're going to go over the results of that study and all the capital projects that are recommended by that study to improve the capacity, especially on the west side, really actually on the west side, to really to get the water flowing quicker off the streets and properties and into the catch basins.
Yeah.
And sorry, if I may just add to that, I also participate, for example, in various regional committees and groups, things like having a regional cache of certain products if there was another pandemic, as an example. There's a regional cache that we have access to, and, working with the Red Cross and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I guess my concern is that you said that they would give us funding to help with some of the mitigation efforts. I guess wherever this fund is coming from. Now,
Yeah.
are we committing city resources? And
No. What happens, and we've done this before, we have to declare a local
Emergency.
emergency, but of course, the federal government, for the Stafford Act, has to do the same thing, or the state, right? We declare the local emergency here, and then that entitles us for reimbursement of eligible costs per
Okay.
outline in
That was
that
the question.
specific
So
emergency.
even
yeah.
if we use outside help, we're still eligible?
We're still eligible,
Okay,
yeah.
that's
absolutely.
what I was getting at.
Follow up? Oh, okay, everybody's good? Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Staff recommended motion is that the governing body adopt the 2022 Northern Virginia Hazard Mitigation Plan and the City of Manassas Park Annex as presented, subject to final city attorney review.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 9B, active transportation plan.
Good evening, Mayor Richel, Vice Mayor Mensing, members of council, residents, staff, guests. I'm Calvin Odell, the Director of Community Development. In June, you were presented sort of the bones of this active transportation plan. The city received $60,000 from Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments through their Transportation Planning Board and their Land Use Connection Program. To put together our first ever active transportation plan. An active transportation plan, for those of you that don't know, is sort of a roadmap for pedestrian and bicycle facilities in your jurisdiction. Mead and Hunt headed up this project for MWCOG on behalf of the City of Manassas Park. And as I said, you had seen bits and pieces of this plan in June when Steve Hall, the Transportation Program Manager, presented it. The details of the plan were in your packet. And we do have the projects in slide form here tonight, but I'm going to go ahead and defer giving the entire presentation and just see if there are any questions for myself or Mr. Brian Laverty from Mead and Hunt, who was the project manager on this.
Okay. Thank you, Calvin. From looking over the material, I would say that the importance of the gap assessment cannot be overstated. I think that's very important. And congratulations on the selection of the criteria. I think the criteria were very well done. Thank you. Comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
My question is, I loved seeing it all broken down in the details, so thank you. What are the next steps? So are these going to be inserted in the CIP or?
Yeah, so I can comment on that. So this is a guide for us, just like the IT roadmap was
Mhm.
before, to help guide the CIP discussion and, more importantly, our application for grants. So remember, the big thing that came out of this discussion was the pedestrian crossing on Route 28.
Yeah.
So we're in the process now. Steve is going to be working with our grant consultant to submit our actual grant application to study what that would look like. It's called it's a federal grant called Reconnecting Communities. It was part of the infrastructure bill. So we feel that project actually aligns perfectly. So we're going to apply for those funds to cross your fingers, and that would be the first part of a study to figure out what that would look like, what the budget would be, and then we could move to design. So this guides our CIP. We'll probably come back with a comprehensive plan amendment to incorporate these findings as well, but it really is a helpful tool when we're applying for grants for funding for transportation to show that we've done the due diligence in terms of identifying those priority needs. But at the end of the day, the CIP and the comprehensive plan are your plan for what has to happen. This kind of feeds into that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Comments or questions, folks?
Just one comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's just, the work that you put in this just emphasizes just how pedestrian unfriendly everything is. Because I know last weekend when we were walking around, just on Manassas Drive, there was just a few times I didn't feel very safe crossing streets. So much less the small children going to school crossing streets. So, thank you.
Is this,
Your follow-up?
Oh.
No, okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
is this connecting with Prince William County side on Euclid, and does this plan also address, like, there's certain gaps that are in the city, I guess?
Yeah, it was mentioned that we had a category within the study for further study recommendations. The 28 crossing was one of those,
Right.
but also probably the second most prominent one of those was to look specifically at Euclid,
Right.
along with the county and the city of Manassas, to come up with one unified solution
Yeah.
for that entire corridor.
Excellent, very good, thank you.
I did have a question, sorry. On slide 15, we're talking bicycle recommendations, installing a shared youth path between the VRE parking lot and Blooms Park Trail. Are we gonna be allowing bicycles on the Blooms Park trails? Because currently they're not encouraged.
No,
to be
yeah, not
allowed.
on the current trails. This all has to happen in conjunction with kind of
Oh, with like,
revital or enhancements, we're calling it, for Blooms Park to
Okay.
build out bicycle-friendly trails in addition to walking trails as well. So that's
okay, so
way
this
down the
would be
road.
with that, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, that's it.
Any other comments? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The staff recommended motion is that the governing body accept the active transportation plan as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Calvin. And we'll go ahead and take a short 5-minute break right now before we launch into more discussion. Good evening, Alan.
Good evening. Mayor Rochelle, Vice Mayor Mansing, members of the council, thank you so much for listening to me tonight. My name's Alan Rowley. I'm the city engineer for water and sewer. And tonight I'm here to talk about the proposed agreement with USG Water to repair and upgrade the city's 3 water tanks. We have Hunter Dance from USG Water with us also in case there are more detailed questions than I can answer. This agreement is writing the City of Manassas contract for tank maintenance under the cooperative procurement provisions of the state code. The work will include interior and exterior renovations, including painting and cleaning, installation of locks on roof hatches to enhance security, and annual cleaning and maintenance. And I've got here a mock-up of the paintings of a potential. Oh, there it is there, sorry. This is a potential mock-up of a painting scheme on the Blooms Park tank, Blooms Quarry tank. Uses some of the new city logos. Just thought that would be good to see. The total value of this contract is $709,197, spread over 3 years. Fiscal year '24 would have $445,000, $492. Fiscal '25, $253,891. And fiscal year '26, $9,814.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Alan. It's a very expensive project. When each tank is done successively, is this going to affect water pressure?
Probably, it shouldn't, because our tanks mainly serve for fire flow volume. So
Okay.
pressure is maintained throughout the system from the 2 sources of water from the City of Manassas and the Prince William County Service Authority.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
The only question I have is how long does it take to get that started completed tank from painting? How long does that take?
Sure.
Construction time.
Thank you all, Mayor, members
Yeah.
of the governing
Can you
body.
come to the microphone, please?
Sure.
Yeah. And speak directly into it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all for having us. Typically on the size of the tanks in Manassas Park, we'll be doing a full interior and exterior renovation. So on the interior of these tanks, we are blasting the coating down to bare steel, okay? They are in need of repair and rehabilitation. So you're looking anywhere from 5 to 8 weeks on the larger tanks. Probably 4 to 6 weeks on the Manassas Drive tank, which is the smallest of the 2, of the 3. We are also addressing some water quality, or helping the procedures that we do will help with water quality in the tanks, because they're not only for fire suppression, they're drinking water. We're putting new vents on the tanks to help them breathe, to help the off-gas, the chlorine in the water and the disinfectants. And the cleanings that we do remove all the biofilm that can build up on the interior of these tank walls. So that's the, 8 weeks is the max. I like to under-promise and over-deliver, so.
Any
I
questions?
just have one question. That's probably silly. How do you get into the tank? Is there a door? From the bottom or is it from the top? I've never
It's a
seen
great
it.
question.
Jump in the top.
There's a man-way, what we call on the side of the tanks at the ground level.
Right.
But we climb the tanks and go in through the roof hatch.
Oh,
That's cool.
wow.
Mhm.
That seems cool.
That is
Thank you.
cool.
That's involved.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
climb as much as I used to, but.
It's a long ladder.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I
Yes,
did.
ma'am.
Do you remember the last time we did maintenance on the towers?
It was, I've been with the city for 6.5 years, but it was before I came here, and as near as I can tell, it's on the order of 15 years, maybe longer for some of the tanks.
Okay. And what's the standard for maintenance? How many years for maintenance?
So, the Commonwealth does not have standards, regulations in place. It's recommended that they're inspected every 5 years. In February of last year, we began a condition assessment washouts of all the 3 tanks. So we washed them all out, did a full condition report, and together with Alan and Calvin, we have put together this maintenance rehabilitation plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the report on the tanks, and I appreciate your technical experience. So the verbiage that's going on the side of the tank, I like the fact that we're using the new city logo, but is there a possibility we could have one tank that says, you know, home of the Manassas Park Cougars or something like that to give a nod to our high school?
Can we get the paw?
Yeah, the paw print. No, exactly.
The paw print.
Exactly.
I mean, that
paw
would be
print.
that would be your all's discretion. Which tank would you want to
Well,
do
we
that?
could pick one, but I think the
Okay.
high school deserves
The one by the high school.
that kind of recognition.
So
Which one
the
is
fire
closest?
station one.
Fire
right?
station.
Yes, okay.
Bloom's Court Fire Station?
Yes.
Yeah,
fire
that's the
station.
closest
Yeah,
one.
that's a good
And
one.
what I've seen in other jurisdictions, they also list the years that they were champions.
Well, that may be too much, but if
That's a
you just give them
That could
their
backfire when
own
it's been a
little
while.
name on
It's
it,
been a long time.
might be a long
You can
time.
absolutely do that, and you can even, you know, they're still undecided on the actual colors of the tank, so you have
Okay.
a lot of options.
Yeah,
Well, I think one should be
yeah,
for the high school.
yeah,
I like that. I agree.
yeah. That wouldn't run the bill up, would it?
I'd have to see the logo, but it shouldn't.
Okay.
And I can tell you from the airplane, you can see the one over on Joshua. When when they
Yeah.
come into land and they turn that way, you can see it quite well.
Yeah.
And
I
you all
was- 'cause
still
I've
want
seen
to
it
say
from the
City of
airplane.
Manassas Park, home of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Cougars,
Home of
okay,
the-
and then have the paw there,
Yeah,
okay.
that'd be nice.
Yeah. Okay, super.
Yeah,
Any other comments or?
Yeah,
Yes.
just one question. So after the renovations on these tanks, then is there annual maintenance with your company or no?
I was gonna say, this is a 3-year agreement. At that point, we would have to put out another contract or another.
Right, so after the 3 years, I'm saying, so another
Right,
contract.
after the 3 years, I think the state requirement may be 5 years, as Hunter says, but I think annually inspecting and cleaning is a good idea.
Yeah.
So my company, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary. And we have our maintenance plans or asset management programs
Okay.
that Alan and Calvin and Laszlo, we've all been talking about maybe entering into one of those after this 3-year contract. So we'd get them to like new condition and then maintain it.
Right.
But those contracts, we have 6,000 of them, and many in the Commonwealth. Those are typically to do an annual visual inspection every year,
Okay.
and then a washout inspection every other year,
Okay.
which is the standard in many other states. So,
Hmm.
trying to get Virginia get on the same page.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
that's it. Any final comments? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The staff recommended motion is that the governing body approve and authorize the city manager to sign an agreement with Utility Service Company Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $709,197 to repair the city's 3 water tanks over a 3-year period as described in Scope of Work 1, Scope of Work 2, and Scope of Work 3 attached thereto as presented, subject to final city attorney review.
Move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Rental district staffing discussion.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of the governing body. So over the last few months, I've been hearing more about concerns about rental issues that run the gamut, whether they're short-term rentals, within 30 days or long-term rentals greater than 30 days, and the constant kind of turnover that we're we're seeing, and maybe some overcrowding that we're seeing as well. So we decided to bring out some prior regulations that we were looking at with short-term rentals when the issue popped up a few years ago. We decided to finalize those and bring that forward to the Planning Commission and governing body for consideration for regulations for both zoning, how we would set up an inspections regime to ensure life safety for people who are living in these homes, to make sure that they're safe living there, that they're regulated so we can track how many there are through the registry program for both the zoning office and the Commissioner of Revenue as well, and then to tackle that. But the other issue, of course, is long-term rentals. Currently, we have a district that covers pretty much west of Euclid Avenue, with the exception of the Mosby subdivisions right here, Kirby and Mosby. So that covers a big chunk of our city, but the problem is there's no teeth to it, right? It's really, I think only two people, Mickey, sign it, or actually comply with the rental district. And we know there's a lot more rentals out there than that. But the discussion came up of what about the other? How do we track some of the other parts of the city as well, the growing concern on the east side? So with this issue, we're not just bringing back the regulatory framework. There's another component of expanding the long-term rental district to here, the red areas, and also talking about how we actually enforce this. So first, with the expansion of the long-term rental district, the way that I thought of this is if we, one of the criteria, so really the criteria are about blight, right, as houses age. So age was a consideration in those conditions when you look at why you would establish a rental district. So to keep it simple, I said, let's look at homes that were built year 2000 or before and add them to the rental district. Those are now over 20 years of age. Building codes requirements continue to get better and better in terms of how homes are constructed. So that could be a good cutoff date for us to utilize to be able to expand the rental district to cover a big chunk of the eastern half of the city, not to include newer subdivisions such as Belmont Station, Dominion Crossing, even Primrose area is not covered under this. On the west side, the Kirby subdivision would not be under this as well. They were built in 2003, 2004, and none of the downtown products aren't included in this as well. But this would help at least expand the rental district if that's something that you're interested in. That was a discussion we had before. This is a way to do that. And then to actually have some teeth behind this and also the short-term rentals, right? We really do need a rental enforcement team to be created. The current code enforcement team of 1.5 full-time equivalents, they're already bogged down, as you'll see in Calvin's presentation in a couple of weeks here. The number of citations have skyrocketed over the last few years. We're taking people to court. It's a lot of work. The priorities you can see: the trash, yard waste, car and yards, inoperable vehicles, fences, structure and disrepair, grass, and more. It's something they've been tackling. The trash issue especially has taken a lot of time to have to survey the entire city regularly, twice, right, to check who's keeping their bags out, providing them the warning, following up then the day after with the citation. We're going to start focusing on trash bins as well as another issue. So there's already too much to do for that 1.5 code enforcement team to manage. So to actually do something about this rental issue, if we're serious about doing it, would require creating this rental enforcement team that would include a zoning inspector and building inspector. The zoning inspector would be the one actually investigating, kind of like the research we did, right? What are the Airbnbs? What are the VRBOs? What are the rentals as well, right? Going all the different sites for long-term rentals, checking out Facebook, looking for evidence of homes that are renting out units for both the long-term rental in the inspection district and then also as part of the short-term rental evidence of that. And then we could provide warnings to these homes that they're clearly renting out, they're providing rental options in their homes, and they need to get in compliance with permitting from both the rental inspection district, if it's a long-term rental, or from the new regime that we proposed earlier tonight for short-term rentals, to get in line with those regimes and to cooperate or apply for those permits through the Development Services Division. So the zoning inspector would manage that, and then the building inspector and zoning inspector would go out to actually inspect these properties, right? We want to make sure that they're in safe condition for renters, that square footage requirements are met as well in terms of occupant loads as well. All the safety things that the building code requires and the zoning requires is what they would be looking at. Just one caveat though, this wouldn't resolve the overcrowding where there's families, right? Courts it's very difficult unless there's something illegal happening in terms of building code violations. It's a challenging issue to tackle when people claim that they have proof that they're actually part of the same family. The judges normally don't side with us in those cases, but where we can be successful is by gaining access for inspection. We can see if there's illegal locks, kitchens, other things that are not allowed per the building code for life safety. So that would give us the advantage from that standpoint. So again, the building inspector would go out and do the inspections. The zoning inspector would likely join in. They'd have to now manage the permit process, so we'll have to see how many of these cases there are. Will the permitting office themselves need additional support as well? We only have one permit technician. They're working right now on all existing permits that exist right now, so if we're going to go a little bit more aggressive here, that work volume may increase as well. But for right now, this is kind of the minimum team, right? If we really want to do this, we probably have a data analyst join that team as well to do all the research behind all the rentals and investigation through all the social media sites and everywhere else to really track this down. But I'm starting with the minimum, right, of what I think is actually just the bare bones minimum to enforce the current law, not even the additional regulations that we're talking about, but just the banning of short-term rentals and that one rental district that exists west of Euclid. This is the team that we would need to actually do that, right? If we're expanding it, then that's just an additional kind of workload on this existing team. But this team is needed right now for enforcement if we want to tackle this issue. And I heard at the town halls as well, when we were doing the town halls on the downtown development, there was some points brought up about overcrowding, some concerns about renters and demand that we do something about it. And I told them I would certainly bring this up for discussion to you all to see kind of what next steps you all would want to take. The cost for this, for the 2 employees, would be $195,000 to $225,000, depending on qualifications. Of course, this includes benefits as well that we have, and then the annual lease purchase cost for a vehicle. So to kind of sum up all of tonight's conversations, you have some policy decisions to make on how you want to proceed. We can stick with the status quo where short-term rentals are prohibited. We keep the current rental inspection boundaries, but we continue the very, very, very limited reactive enforcement, right? It's going to be very minimal. We're going to, unless you tell us to stop enforcing trash and grass and other things and focus on this, we can do that. But then I have a feeling those things are going to become a problem and you're going to demand that we go back and enforce those items. But that's the status quo. Option 2 is keep the status quo, but actually bring some teeth to it, build some enforcement capacity, right? So prohibit the short-term rentals as we have right now and keep only the current rental inspection boundaries, which is west of Euclid, and focus on those specific areas and hire the team to go to focus on attacking those specific fronts where we have those issues. Or option 3, do the enforcement piece along with the additional regulations as well for hopefully to give us a little bit more teeth in terms of inspections of for the rental districts, it would be an additional burden, but for the short-term rentals, the regulations, again, would hopefully keep people utilizing Airbnb and VRBO and then allow us to more easily identify them now that they're permitted, right? Hopefully more people would utilize them, and then we could have a regime, an actual inspection regime as well to go out and inspect from a safety standpoint, from a building standpoint. Yes?
So when you're referring to expand the boundaries, you're referring to expanding it to homes built year 2000 and prior?
That's correct. The additional red areas on the map that I showed you here.
Oh, it would seem like a good idea, even though we might not be able to enforce the way we would want to. At least we would put the mechanism in place that would enable us in the future.
Yeah, that's going to be your all's discretion.
Yeah.
I'm just presenting kind of what
okay.
what the options are, and that's another option too. Do the regulations without enforcement. I don't recommend that. I think the expectation of residents are that we actually do something about these laws as well, that we enforce them. So I would not recommend that personally. And then just a side note, again, there are people that are looking for rental options a lot, right? We are starting to see a lot of renting of homes because of the other issue I talked about at the town hall, which is the housing market manipulation between demand and supply, and just the need that we need to keep doing our part at least for supply. It's a larger regional issue that we can't control, but at least we can do our part to provide housing options for people who are looking for them as we start potentially kicking people out of homes, right, for illegal rentals. We need to provide some housing options for them as well.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Does option 3 require cooperation with the Commissioner of Revenue?
Only
be
from a
able to-
tax perspective.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we would still be able to get lists of the houses that are,
We would have to, we'd have to do the investigations through the social media channels and through other methods to try to find out who's doing the rentals. From a tax perspective, certainly cooperation with short-term rentals on the registry would be very helpful with the commissioner, and then we can potentially partner with the treasurer on water data for usage to see kind of, potentially high usage homes and kind of question, make it a little bit more and have that
We also
conversation.
need you to do a little research and see if there's any way, what can we afford right now?
Well, that'll come at the budget amendment in December when I
Okay.
present that.
Yeah, I agree with the mayor. If we could hire one now, I think that'd be best. The other thing about expanding the rental, so we would also have protections. You'd have to have the smoke detectors, the carbon monoxide. They'd be looking for those things as well in the rental inspections. We have to do that.
For the long-term rentals?
Yeah.
It depends on when they were built and whether or not.
We're talking 2,000 or
Nikki,
below.
could you come to the microphone? I'm sorry.
I'll defer to Calvin, but, I mean, it would be based on when they were constructed. So if the fire alarms, the interconnected ones weren't required, but I think that were, most when Bloom's Crossing was built, that would be inspected. So it is based on when they were constructed.
Even if they weren't interconnected, as long as they had smoke detectors and they're renting their basement out to tenants, they should have smoke detectors in them. And they should have carbon monoxide detectors in them. So to me, that should be part of this process. If we're gonna have this inspection of rental units, checklist, yes, a checklist.
Let's check we'll follow up with the city attorney and see if that's maybe a code enhancement that can be done as a requirement. We'd have to check with Dean, because again, as a Dillon rule state, the state has to enable us to do that.
Great, okay. Thank you.
Comments? Yes, ma'am.
is it possible to do like an option 2.5 where we get prohibited short-term rentals but expand the inspection boundaries?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, and with enforcement.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Because I think expanding the boundaries is smart. We need to be inspecting and making sure that people in their long-term rentals are safe in their homes.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, to Councilmember Moore's point here, I think Baltimore is probably a good example. So city of Baltimore, you got to get a rental license, and every year they come in with a checklist to renew the license. And it's got fire extinguisher, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, look for mold, any leak and stuff like that. So like having that checklist each time the inspector comes, I guess those items.
No, we would have a checklist again, but what I have to see is what code and amendments we would have to do for additional requirements per Councilmember Moore. Yeah.
Oh, good. And also, when you have time, look at, because there's a way the city could register on Airbnb. And basically Airbnb will just handle everything for the city, collecting the permits, the taxes, all that stuff, and then gives it to the city.
That's just Airbnb. I mean, that'd be nice.
Yeah, that's just Airbnb.
But we'd also
right.
want to oversee what they're doing. I'm not sure I would trust them 100% to.
Oh, no, it's just
Yeah.
complying with city, local regulations and codes. So
But
basically,
they're-
before the listing goes live, hey, we need your city license, or we need your zoning permit. We're collecting tax.
Yeah, so requiring that they come and get in compliance with us.
Right.
Yeah, no, that would be very helpful. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think I might have a link. I'll forward it to you. I'll
Yeah.
see what.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned December for the budget amendment, but can you let us know sooner than that?
We're doing so we're still closing the budget right now. We're still doing the audit right now. So
Okay.
If I felt comfortable with our surplus money, I know we're going to have some surplus from last year, so if you'd want to allocate some of that surplus, we could, but I'd rather get a little bit farther advanced in the audit before I feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. Do you have a question or comment?
No.
Okay. Do you feel you have sufficient guidance?
Oh, you guys need to decide what you want to do. I'm just here to present, yeah.
Well, I thought we had.
Well, I don't know where you guys are leaning. Do you want to wait for the budget amendment to have follow-on discussions based off financial feasibility? Is that the direction we want to go?
Okay, well, okay, that's a good question.
Maybe we start like low-hanging fruit. We kind of break it down. Do we all agree with expanding the
Boundary.
the
The
boundary?
boundaries, yeah, yeah. I think we all,
Yeah.
yeah, we do.
Okay, so we got that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And hiring one, if possible,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
two, if there's enough funding?
If we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Before the budget amendment?
I would prefer to wait
I would, yeah.
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 to see what the budget amendment looks like
Right.
before we commit to almost a six,
Right, yeah.
you know.
But it sounds, at least for the interim, we want to expand the rental district and just stop there and hold off on anything else until we have the budget amendment.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can do that.
Because we have to start enforcement in some way.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we won't, like, it'll be the status quo, but at least we'll have new regulations, so
Right.
when the time comes, if the resources are put there.
We can flip the switch.
Exactly,
Right,
the
right.
enforcement will go a
Okay.
lot quicker, yeah.
Okay. Okay, does that sound good to everyone? Yeah, okay, is there anything else?
Mayor, I have a couple of comments. There were some questions that were asked,
Yes,
and
go ahead.
so the first thing has to do with the whether or not you can go in there and make sure that they are in code compliance, and that is yes. If you look at the enabling legislation, it says specifically that the building code official can determine whether or not there are safe, decent, and sanitary living conditions for the tenants, and they can check to see whether or not it's let's see. I'm just looking to see what. So basically, they're going in there and they're looking as if they were investigating a new building. Really, I mean, they're looking to see if it's up to code, because that is what is the current understanding of what's safe for residents. So yes, you can enforce that. The second part was whether or not we can charge a fee. And the answer is yes, we can. The state code allows us to, and our current code section does allow us to as well. It's determined, the amount is determined by the fee schedule approved by the governing body. I looked recently at the most recent fee schedule update, and it's just the ones that have changed. So I can't find out what that fee is, but the idea would be that it would reimburse the city for the actual cost of staff to go out there and investigate, or inspect, I should say.
Okay,
So hopefully that answers your questions.
okay, yeah. I know we're going to wait until the budget amendment, but as soon as you have a sense for what we can afford and what we can't afford, let us know so that we can begin to answer questions from residents. You know, if we get a question, well, are we going to enforce? We'll say, well, it's looking as though we can afford X, Y, Z.
Okay,
You know, so
will do.
that would be helpful. Any
And-
other comments or, yes?
Well, only if you're getting a sense of the council, I would approve of option 3, but after we decide, or we know that we can fund the extra 2 people to enforce, but I do think we should expand short-term rental policy that was discussed today, because I am concerned about the safety of these units.
Yeah.
And I think if we have people in place to enforce it, I think it'll be better for our communities. I mean, if there's no
Yeah.
parties and parking is limited, it's a good thing that we have a policy than to stick our head in the sand and say, we're not gonna do nothing.
Right, right.
It sounds like we have some research to do on that subject as well, so when we present the budget amendment, we'll also
That
bring
sounds
that
great.
issue back for decision for you all.
Perfect.
Yeah,
And a long-term rental.
I think that's wise, because there's always unintended consequences to all of this.
I have a follow-up on the parking portion. I know we're saying that they have to have 2 off-street or 1 off-street parking, but we can't actually enforce the people using it. They could be renting it out to 6 people, and they could all choose to park on the street. Just because the option is there, it doesn't mean they're gonna take it, so I don't see how this is gonna have a net neutral on our parking situation.
So from my understanding, though, Mickey, correct me if I'm wrong, that if someone can't meet that requirement, then they wouldn't be allowed to do the short-term rental, right?
Right,
Yeah.
at the time of application, correct, but I think she's speaking to the habits of the lodgers.
Yeah, I'm saying.
So if they have the capacity, even then, though, they may park other cars there, is what you're saying?
Right, when my
Yeah.
mother comes to visit me, she refuses to come into my driveway. It's vacant, but she's parking on the street. So I'm just saying, it doesn't mean that people are gonna actually do it.
But your house was not listed as a Airbnb.
Well, no, it's not.
And your neighbors probably know, like my neighbors know when certain people come to my house, they realize it's my brother's car or
Sure,
my
I'm just
cousin's
saying,
car.
we could potentially be adding 4 cars to the road.
But we had got that now. We already
Right,
have that
But
now.
on top of it, if people see that this is a legal option, I think we're gonna get more of them.
But I think doing nothing really is not helping us, because right now we can only go after what we see on Airbnb. If we make it legal, then it covers us for everything. So
that-
if someone is putting, has a short-term lease and it's, I don't know, posted on a bulletin board at a grocery store around here, and we come across it and we see that it's at a house here, then it gives the city some opportunity to go in and make sure that it's not a death trap, that they are applying by the same rules by someone that's gone to Airbnb. Because doing nothing evidently has not helped, because you can see we've got, 30? Was it 30? And that's what we know of?
But I'm not recommending doing nothing. I'm recommending telling these 31 homes that they're in violation and they need to cease. That's not a nothing option.
But what
That's an
about the ones
enforcement.
that are on Facebook and that are on other?
Well, that's why the team would be hired, to find them and enforce. So I'm definitely not saying do nothing.
I'm telling you right now, so what I can see is status quo is not really, that we're keeping the status quo is really not helping us.
Well, I'm not in favor of option 1. I'm in favor of option 2B. We can call it something else. We could say no short-term.
I'm in
policy
favor
with
of
enforcement.
adding one person and trying it out, and then doing a determination if you need more. Ones if it is just 30 or just 35, and we have 2 people, or I don't.
Yeah, but remember, it's not just for short-term rentals, it's for the rental inspection district.
I understand.
And I think we have to remember that the more rentals there are, the more stress there is on the community. There's garbage, there's parking, there's draw on the water sewer system. I mean, when these neighborhoods were built, they were built for a certain number of people. And when you start adding too many people in, those are stresses on the community.
Well, that also moves it from single family to multifamily.
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
The long-term rentals will still need to be registered too, right?
Yeah, they would have to get their, what is it called, Mickey? A certificate, rental compliance, or certificate of compliance.
Certificate of compliance. And what is the short-term rental? Same thing?
That one is called, what is that one called? Zoning permit for short-term rentals.
Zoning permit. And then do we have a fee schedule for any violations? Yeah.
Violations of the rental inspections. Dean, do you know what is it a misdemeanor charge? Because it's a zoning violation, right? Yeah.
For which one? The current one right now, having an illegal short-term rental?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a zoning violation. So that
Okay.
is a misdemeanor.
Misdemeanor charge.
Misdemeanor.
I don't have a sense, maybe you, Mr. City Manager, has, as far as Airbnb regulations of this body. Where are we with this? I'm not sure where we stand.
So I don't think there's consensus on that. I think the consensus is expanding the rental district, and then when we do the budget amendment, we can see how many resources we can apply to the issue. Then that's where we're gonna bring back the short-term rental regulation discussion.
Okay.
Along with hopefully some additional data
That's
on
fine.
what's happening in other jurisdictions as well.
Yeah, that
Sounds good, okay.
I think some people were trying to ban the short-term or no?
Do you feel that you have enough
Yes.
guidance right now? Okay. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add? Councilmember Javed, you look like you have something you want to say.
I always got something. But
Okay. Okay. There is no motion because because you already have your guidance, okay. Okay, moving on is our next public comment time. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to utilize? Yes, please come to the microphone, state your name and address, and limit yourself to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Ritchell, and
Can you get up to the microphone? Yeah.
Maybe I'll hold it.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Alan Butchnick, what is on, and I am the co-chair of Active Prince William, an advocacy group, as well as a City of Manassas resident. I'd like to commend Stephen Hall for his outstanding work as the city's transportation program manager, and Brian Laverty of Mead and Hump for developing a one-flag transportation plan for the city. This document provides an excellent starting point to make Manassas Park more livable, healthier, prosperous, and sustainable by improving the convenience and safety of bicycling and walking. However, no plan is perfect, and I'd like to make 2 suggestions for future minor improvements. First, there is no inherent reason why segments of a particular street, such as Euclid Avenue, can't simultaneously have both an on-road and an off-road bicycle facility. The bicycling public is very diverse in its riding experience, athleticism, and comfort with motor traffic, and with the growing use of electric-assisted bicycles, bicycle operating speeds are vary more than ever. All or part of Euclid Avenue could function well for both with both on-road and off-road bicycle facilities at the same place. And on-road bicycle lanes could be added, retrofitted quickly, readily, and very inexpensively on Euclid, south of Manassas Drive, especially when that roadway is scheduled for routine resurfacing. Secondly, there's no inherent reason why a particular street can't have shared use paths on both sides, especially when that street is 4 or more travel lanes. In my opinion, the plan should call for a shared use path and not merely a sidewalk on the west side of Signal View Drive between Manassas Drive and Signal Hill Park. A shared use path at that location would significantly improve bicycling and rolling access to Signal Hill Park and would not require path users to stop and cross Signal Hill View Drive when traveling between Manassas Drive and Signal Hill Road. Finally, I asked the governing body to ensure that a well-advertised public hearing and comment period is held before this active transportation plan is adopted as a comprehensive plan amendment. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, and we look forward to the effective implementation of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? Yes.
Yeah, Tyler Regula, 281 Mosby Drive. Quick question as far as if we had a incident where somebody's illegal kitchen catches on fire, fire department comes in, is the fire department going to be collaborating with the city to let the city know, hey, there's an illegal kitchen or something's wrong with the unit? How would that work?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so the fire marshal would investigate and then inform the building official, which is Calvin.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Public comment? Okay, seeing no one and hearing no one, we'll move on to city manager's report.
So tonight we have FY23 annual reports from the police department and fire department. At the next meeting, we will have the community development department and Parks and Rec.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the governing body. As Mr. Palco said, I'm going to be presenting the annual report for the police department.
That's at the bottom.
And the first slide is, I'm going to cover some of the highlights for the city. This year, in '23, we came in at the 14th safest city in Virginia, which was a big disappointment. We normally come into the top 10. But when you factor in just the cities and take the towns out, we actually are in the top 5. We're actually 5. As I said before, we had our 6th accreditation awarded this year, which I was proud of. The Virginia Law Enforcement Professional Standards Commission gave us our 6th award. I had a couple of appointments to my command staff, which Captain Dorr is here tonight with us, Captain Walker and Captain Loving. You'll see them around the city now in some of these meetings and being around in some of these other governing body meetings. I'm proud to say that we have an SRO assigned to every school this year. So this will be the first year we've had one in every campus. It seems that everybody's working out. We moved the one from the middle school to the high school and added the new one at the middle school. So the principal seems to be happy with that outcome. Operation-wise, for statistics, although felony arrests are down, we did see an increase in misdemeanor arrests. Traffic arrests are flat, but we've seen an increase in traffic stops, and foot patrol and parking tickets are down. And that one, looking into it, it looks like it's more due to staffing and turnover rate and the call volume. Crime rate is up about 18% for theft. Recently, we pushed something out on our PSA to say, hey, lock your vehicles, your sheds. We've seen an increase this year. Although robberies are down by 16%, in the region, I had a meeting with area chiefs today, and most Part 1 crimes, which is violent crime, is down in the region. It is the property crimes that are up. Police investigations from our 22% increase, and DSS referrals is significantly up this year. Officers responded to 143 calls of medical calls this year. Compared to last year, it was 170. And our busiest time for 911 in this fiscal year was between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. And then peak time for regular calls was between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. This is comparison for our Part 1 crime comparison. And as you can see, we've seen about a 18% increase in larcenies, and that's petty larcenies, thefts from vehicles, sheds, or anything like that. Those are all those crimes. Burglaries were up slightly, robberies were down, rapes were up a little bit. So overall, Part 1 crimes for our city was about the 13% increase. But a lot of it has to factor in the property crimes. Cost for service comparison, as you can see here, and we discussed briefly in some of the other ones, we've seen some increases in misdemeanor arrests. We doubled that. Parking enforcement was slightly down due to turnover rate. Although traffic arrests was about the same as last year, traffic stops increased by 200. And like I said, just the parking enforcement, we had a turnover last year with our parking enforcement officer. We currently have 2 working, doing parking, so those numbers should increase. And foot patrols, we were down this year. That had to do with some of the vacancies we have and retaining our officers. Cost for service, we were slightly down, but overall type of calls were taking longer. Emergency custody orders, that's a typo. It should be 38 for FY22 compared to this year. We got 35. Although we have less cases, we spent more time with these individuals at the hospital. The next 4 slides is going to cover patrol coverage through our GIS mapping, which is going to show where our officers throughout the shifts patrol, drive around, respond to calls. And these is for Q1, which is going to be July, August, September. As you can see, mostly of all the streets are being patrolled at one point or another throughout the shifts. It's hard to do it on these maps, to blow it up with the icons because it overtakes it, but as you can see, all the streets are being covered according to this map. When we increase our numbers in patrol, we should be able to see these additional dots, showing where these officers are at. Second quarter, the same. You're going to see that, overwhelming officers are hitting most of the streets in the city. Obviously, the main thoroughfare, like Manassas Drive, Euclid, all those are going to get more traffic, but our GIS mapping is tracking all these officers throughout the shift. Third quarter, the same, just breaking it down. And same thing, you see where the officers are going throughout their shifts. And in the fourth quarter, and like I just mentioned, if we retain more officers and hire the vacancies we have, we should see these numbers or these areas covered more frequently than we're seeing in these quarters, especially in the last quarter. So we separated our investigative services division stats, and these are for FY23. These DSS referrals was significantly up this year, and special victim crimes was also up this year. This is a comparison from FY22 to FY23. DSS referrals last year was 24, and FY23 is what we had 77. We've seen a significant drop in some other areas, but child pornography cases were slightly up, and special victim cases were up again, which having that special victim detective has really helped manage these cases. That's just outlining the cases there. These are calls for service that come into our dispatch center. As you can see, 90% of the calls that came in for non-emergency, 10% were emergency, and then it breaks it down for like if it was a landline, wireless, or voice over IP, or if sometimes the system doesn't figure out what is coming from, so we have some that are a small percentage. So we were looking at about almost 67% of the calls were wireless for FY22. When you compare them to FY23, we've seen an increase in emergency calls went up by like 5%, and the wireless went up by 18%. And in FY23, our calls, Emergency Communication Center took about close to 28,000 calls that came in. This is our training hours, breaking it down, showing a comparison, what we did in FY22 to 23. We did see an increase. We have people in the academy, so that was a significant amount of hours, and in service was about the same as in FY22. Parking violations, here is showing our collection rate and how many tickets were written in FY22 and also FY23. Parking enforcement vehicle that we finally got GIS mapping on it, so you're only going to see third and fourth quarter of the areas they're patrolling. So this is a map showing January, February, March of this year, where the parking enforcement vehicle patrolled. And as you can see, 90-something% of the streets are being covered here. And that was just having one parking enforcement officer. But that doesn't mean that some of these other streets weren't covered, because our patrol officers not only enforce traffic, but they also enforce parking violations. So in the map that we saw earlier, some of these other streets might have been covered in terms of parking.
Also, the employee was new back then, so
Yeah.
some confusion about where our borders were, but you can see the next slide. It got corrected.
Yeah.
That's the beauty. So that's the benefit of GIS now in our patrol vehicles and parking. Operations teams now can track where every patrol vehicle is going, making sure we're getting coverage across the city, every single city street we want to cover on a regular basis.
And here's our photo enforce program. This shows the numbers, the breakdowns of how many citations were issued, collection rate, fines for FY22 for the speed and the red light program, and it compares it to the FY23 numbers.
Has it gone down?
Yes, they have gone down.
Good.
We've seen a decrease, which is good. That's what the cameras are designed for. We're seeing a decrease in violations. So, and those boxes reflect, back when we started the program, November 21, compared it to an FY23 right before school ended, and you see the numbers for the speed cameras, how much they've gone down. And same for the red light cameras. We're part of this program called My 90. So anytime somebody calls our dispatch center from a cell phone, they receive a text and a survey, and pretty much ask them a few questions, what kind of service they received, was the call taker nice, you know, just different questions that they'll ask. And out of 132 responses that went out, we had about almost 12% return, which for a survey I'm hearing, according to the company, is pretty good to get that high. And this is some of the stuff that was asked, questions like, what is your top safety concern in the community? And the biggest thing they talked about was theft and traffic offenses. And the next question they would ask is, what would you most like Manassas Park Police Department to improve safety in your community? And they all pretty much said, which was a high percentage of 69%, wanted police presence, high visibility. And we're hoping with the GIS mapping, as Mr. Palco spoke about, that we're going to increase that and see a higher police presence, because we can now monitor what streets are not being patrolled, and we can have our officers, hit those areas.
So yeah, just to add, we've been talking about the Traffic Enforcement Division as well as something that we're looking for. And it's clearly the respondents are looking for that, but they're catching on as well. What residents are reporting in terms of theft is what is actually matching actual data on crime as well. So it's a pretty good correlation there.
And these are some of the responses that, some of the people that did the survey gave actual feedback. And, one was they talked about the officer and her partner, the service they received. The dispatcher was polite and professional. Some had questions about the traffic lights idea. They think we should put more cameras up. So that was just some of the feedback we received.
Now the traffic citations, now we're going to have the QR code for this as well?
Yeah, so we're working with My 90 now, so anytime we issue a traffic citation or a warning, it's going to have a QR code that the driver could scan it and submit a survey if they please. So now we can capture the interaction with the officers on that traffic stop. Obviously, probably not going to get a whole lot of good feedback if you get a ticket, but I'm hoping they'll be honest with some of the responses.
The customer satisfaction scores will probably go down next year.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chief. That was great. On slide number 11, what accounted for the 3 times DSS referral? That's a big jump.
So that's a good question. I asked about that, and we were having, I want to say an issue, but there was some referrals that were not getting to us in a timely manner, so we asked DSS to send us everything.
Oh, okay.
So regardless whether it's a police matter, we were receiving it. So we can get, there were some that were just, I don't want to say falling through the cracks or, what was going on, because I wasn't aware that this was an issue, but we just had them submit all of them.
Right, okay. Comments or questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. What's the status of the one homicide that we had this year?
So, obviously, the suspect's been identified. He has fled the country.
Fled the country. Do we get FBI involved at that point, or Interpol?
We're working on it, sir.
We're working on it. Okay.
We're working on it, yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's good, good. Can't get too far away.
Yeah, I got a question. Door knockers, do they need to be registered with your office?
Good question.
Or get a
I don't know what
permit
you
or
mean by-
something? They come like roofers, they come solicitors.
Solicitors, I think they have to register with the city.
I think it's Commissioner of Revenue or Treasurer. I got to look at the code on that one. Yeah, but I think they need a license from the commissioner.
And then they carry that around with them when they go door to door?
So if we get a complaint, that's the first thing we're going to ask them.
Right. Because, I think what I've been hearing is like some people are doing fake door knocking without any credentials, just to see if they're home or casing the property or something, and then they circle back or something. I don't know if you heard something like that.
No, not in our city. I've heard it before in other places, but
Yeah.
I haven't heard that we were dealing with that here.
Okay.
I think on Facebook not too long ago, people were posting from their doorbell cameras that door knockers are like taking pictures inside of their homes.
They didn't report it to us, so I'm not aware of that, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, hopefully they report it next time.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I have a question. How many overdoses were there last year, and how many were there fatal? How many times did you have to Narcan?
I'd have to get you that information, sir. We do report it to the state and to the region, but I don't have those numbers with me right now.
Okay,
What was
so-
your question? I couldn't hear.
About overdoses and deaths and Narcanning.
Okay.
Second question, I know the larcenies are up, and I know why they're up, because of the state law that changed. Do you see a lot of the frequent people being rearrested for the larcenies? Is that your experience?
It's been a while, but some of these ones are mostly younger kids or.
You don't have a lot of frequent fires?
No, we don't seem like we do, like we used to. There was one time when we knew who was
Yeah.
doing it, and we can go, we knew they were out of jail because they started doing it again.
How many vacant FTEs do you have right now?
6.
6 all patrol?
And officers, and then total 9 or 10 with admin and dispatch.
On patrol, how often do you turn over a year? Is it about 3 to 4 usually every year, or is it?
Last year, 9 officers left the agency in FY23.
Thank you.
I was going to just to add on to the previous comment that just the lack of reporting, like sharing on social media doesn't mean that police are going to be made aware. So we really need people to call timely so we can try to capture people.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Chief, what's the threshold now, the dollar value for something to be considered a felony?
1,000.
Captain Dorr, what is it now? It changed?
It's 1,000.
It's 1,000? Yes, 1,000.
1,000.
Yeah.
When did it what did it change from?
300.
When did it change?
3 years ago.
2 or 3 years,
Previous
2 or 3 years
Can
ago?
you speak directly into?
I'm sorry, it was
Thank you, Chief.
300 3 years ago by the previous members of our assembly.
It
and
went
pre-
from 300 to
Yes,
1,000?
yes, the previous governor signed that.
Why the big jump? I mean, that's well more than inflation.
Because there was sympathy towards criminals, in my opinion.
That's a big jump.
Yeah, it is. They should have
Wow.
kept it at where it was, to be honest. But
I beg your pardon?
they should have kept the amount where it was, but they
Yeah.
decided to change the Virginia
Yeah.
code.
300 to 1,000. Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Oh, one more question, sir.
Yeah.
The trails out in here, Bloom, we got time to time people getting lost in those trails inside the Bloom's Park. What's the possibility, it might be a Lazo question too, of putting an emergency signal in there?
Beacon.
Or a beacon or something like, I see them in the trail, I think they have like the blue light or something, you know what I'm talking about? And then they could go to the nearest one and give you guys a signal where they are located.
Sort of like a blue light special.
Well, George Mason used to, well, back when I went to George Mason, which was years ago, they had those along the path. Because we had some, we call them Rambo paths.
Right.
Because you were walking in the woods, like, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I think it would be something to consider there down the line. But is that something you guys can respond to, though? If
I mean, it would help, but our parks are closed at dark, so they shouldn't even be on the trails when it's dark.
right, that's true too.
Yeah, the issues we've had is people kind of walking later, and then they don't know, for some reason, they lose
Lose track of time.
track of time and don't know how to get back, and it gets
Well,
dark at that point.
Even during the day, I mean, if you're traveling or hiking alone,
Yeah,
something happens.
we can ask Jay to look into that
Yeah.
and get a quote back for the CIP.
Yeah, at least
Yeah.
something. Or and currently we don't even have any of like a map of the trails either, do we?
We do, yeah.
Is that-
It's in the entrance of the park.
Okay.
Mhm.
Or no, something they could carry with them.
Oh, carry with them? I want to say Jay had some of those at the community center, but I'll check with him and see.
Like maybe like.
And maybe we could just
You
put them
can-
in
yeah,
there for
and
people to
they'll-
take with them.
You can actually scan like a QR, some sort of code, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it takes you to the map on your phone.
Oh, is
That's a
it?
great
Mhm.
idea.
Yeah, that's good then, yeah. So I'm not a hiker, I don't hate the bugs.
Any final questions
I
for the
have-
chief?
Thank you, Chief. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
The 5 fraud cases you got, was it elderly, was it, cell, was it?
I would have to pull those reports to see, but I don't never recall seeing it was elderly.
Okay, all right. Thank
A lot of it's phone scams, like we see, that somebody call up, said the person's been locked up or needs money, and they put money in their account.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
And one last question.
Yeah.
What is the increase of pedestrian versus car accidents in Manassas Park?
I'd be guessing at this point. I can pull those. I
Okay.
don't think it's a whole lot.
I guess when it happens, just seems, because it's quite
Yeah.
large.
I'd say maybe a handful that I recall, because I get
Okay.
the text messages when something like this happens. It's not that many.
Okay, I just wonder because I know when I go down 28, and since the Commonwealth has taken away your ability to give tickets for jaywalking, I always feel like playing Frogger because you have people walking out in front of you in the middle of the street. So, thank you.
You can't ticket jaywalk anymore, though.
No.
They changed that, too.
They took that ability away
And
from
they
them.
also made it, if you saw an officer, a misdemeanor from a felony, too, right?
No, that's still a felony.
So it's a misdemeanor.
Huh?
It's a misdemeanor. It came up today.
No, actually, it is a still felony. We talked about it today at the
It's a
meeting.
6 misdemeanor, 6.
Huh?
It's a misdemeanor 6.
I thought it was still felony. We were talking to the Commonwealth attorneys today because they dropped a couple cases that.
On a simple assault on an officer?
For an officer.
You saw a misdemeanor.
But I think, I think what you're saying, that there has to be injury.
There has to be injury, yeah.
Injury, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. This.
Okay. Y'all can hear me okay, right? All right. So good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the governing body. My name's Adam Jones with the Fire Department. I'm here on behalf of Chief Soper to give you all the fiscal year 23 annual report for the Fire Department. Some highlights and activities for the year. Within the city and other special events, we helped with July 4th, City Hall grand opening dedication, National Night Out, the Latino Festival, and the Light Parade. The command officers attended the International Association of Fire Chiefs Leadership and ICS Training Symposium in San Antonio, Texas. Open house was very well attended by the community with lots of great compliments. Kudos to the Fire Marshal's Office. They have really upped the game of the open house with the fire cells and putting on EMS presentation with the help of the operations staff. I also would like to throw in a little advertisement. We are having our open house again on the 7th of October, so please come out and see us. The department hosted an aerial operator class to ensure personnel are being properly trained for future ladder truck staffing. That class is now over. We are still very much in deep with training for the ladder truck, along with the new people, which I'll talk about in a second. Chief Soper and Deputy Chief Jones attended the Fire Chief Summit, which is in Richmond. Department completed department-wide live fire training at the Fauquier County Training Center. They invited us out to utilize their training center, which afforded us the opportunity to really use our ladder truck and train more on the ladder truck and get the experience that we need. Department personnel assisted in an EMS standby at Arlington National Cemetery for the Memorial Day wreath laying ceremonies. We take our UTV out there and get assignments wherever it is in the cemetery and ride around and provide EMS care. The recruitment process was conducted April and May for Safer Grant positions. It was successful. We were short 2 FTEs and plus the 15, so we did hire 17 people out of that recruitment process. I will give kudos to the fire department staff. They have jumped in head first in helping train all of our new people
We have personnel that had no training whatsoever to personnel who had Fire 1 and 2 and EMT already. They all just jumped in and have gone above and beyond to help those staff get trained, and they're still working on that now as we speak. Department statistics for fiscal year 23, the Fire Marshal's Office had 12 public education events, 121 fire inspections, 37 investigations, and 50 career development program hours. Total calls for service, we were at about little over 3,500 calls. EMS as a primary was 2,100. Fire as a primary was about 1,200. Total unit responses, you can see the medic was over 2,000, engine was 2,500, and the battalion chief was almost 400. Our average on-scene time was 4 minutes and 23 seconds. That's huge for us. The national standard is 7 minutes on-scene time, and that is from dispatch to on-scene time. Our goal is 6 minutes and 30 seconds, so we completely blew that out of the water, which is that's good. Busiest days, Friday and Sunday, and peak call times were from 1,800 hours to 2,400 hours. Some of our performance measures: track all emergency responses for the following data: turnout times, travel times, on-scene times. Like I just said, our goal is to respond to and arrive 90% of the incidents within 6 minutes and 30 seconds. National standard 7 minutes, and as you saw, it's 4 minutes and 30 seconds is around about what we're averaging. Track the location of all emergency responses for the following data: hotspots within the city, time of day, day of the week, and type of incident. Track all personnel training hours for ISO. We improved the rating in our ISO from a 4 to a 3. So obviously our next goal is a 2. One thing that's really going to help that is the ladder truck, getting the ladder truck staffed. That's going to help push us to a 2. Inspection program of high hazard areas and commercial facilities. Completion of calendar year annual reporting. It's a 5-year strategic plan, community risk assessment, standard of coverage documents per the CPSC and the Commission of Fire Accreditation International. Whole department-wide live fire training exercise. Obviously, we did that by going out to Fauquier. Our goal this year is to do 2 different live fire training exercises. A little tough right now just because of onboarding all the 15 new people and training them and all that stuff, but that is still our goal. Maintain OSHA compliance with all personnel receiving NFPA 1582 physicals. That is an annual requirement for us. Comparisons from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23. Emergency responses, as you can see, the total call volume from 22 to 23 went from about 2,900 calls to about 3,500 calls, with EMS increasing. There's our average response and arrival times. Again, those arrival times, 436 from fiscal year 22 to about 423 in fiscal year 23. Box assignment comparisons, we break it down from west, central to east as far as the amount of percentage of calls we run. So it's the city's broken down into boxes throughout the city, and then we take those boxes and percentage them out to where the percentages we're running calls throughout the city. Training and activity hours, as you can see there. One note, why are EMS calls up? The 2 largest population generations, baby boomer and Gen X, are at the age of needing EMS care. So that's...
Okay. Daryl, I guess that's you and I.
Gen X and baby boomers are getting older.
We're boomers.
Oh, well, I know that.
I would just like to note that I did not say that.
Okay.
I just said they're going to need some EMS care. That's all I'm saying.
No, I have embraced my status, not to worry.
I don't know, but us Generation Xers, we're taking, exception to being called old.
To be lumped, right?
Yes.
Fire Marshal's Office, Investigations, as you can see, fire incidents went up 3 calls with the last fiscal year. The background checks, the fire marshal's office does our background checks for our hiring process. So you see why that number is so high. Fire inspections, one thing to note with the fire inspections went from 236 to 92. We were transitioning from a part-time to a full-time person. And once he was hired, he also had to onboard with a lot of other roles and responsibilities as well. That number is increasing now as this last couple months I've seen him out a lot on inspections. So. Public education events, those are the numbers there. And then the community outreach events. Public education events is geared more towards a request that comes into us from like the schools or, the public. They request to come in and see the station and all those things. Then the community outreach events are more along the car seat events or the car seat checks or the city functions that we just go and are a part of and participate in. There you see the training hours. A couple things to note. The fire inspector training hours, once again, was the new full-time person coming on and him getting the training hours in fiscal year 22. And then the public educator class, was the class that was given to all of our staff in fiscal year 22. So that's why that number is so off. With the hiring of the 17 new people here recently, we're probably going to be, or we are going to be implementing that class again. That's instructed by an outside instructor. So. That's it. One thing I will note, and I'll make sure I get it to Laszlo, is with our EMS calls, we do keep track of overdose numbers. Over probably about the last 6 months, we started a section in our EMS reporting that captures that. So I'll get those numbers to Laszlo.
Have you generally seen an increase, or is it flat, or is it decreased?
I would say it's probably about the same. I haven't really seen an increase.
You haven't seen?
But I may be surprised, but I haven't really seen.
Kind of goes like
Okay.
this. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you. The cases kind of go up, down, up,
Yeah.
down.
Are you seeing trank at all in the community? Trank?
That's the zombie drug, right?
It is.
So typically, with overdoses, if we have an overdose, we're gonna give, we don't, that whole, what the drug is, we give the Narcan and then we take them to the hospital and those sort of things. But we don't, that kind of stuff is held to the PD.
Have any of your staff been assaulted after you Narcan?
Say it again.
Have any of your staff been assaulted after you Narcan?
We learned early on to be very careful with that, so not really.
Okay.
And our fire department and police department work so well together, and we're there together all the time that it's
Does it happen?
not a point that we really stress over and have to stress over.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good question. This is more of my curiosity. On slide 3, you talked about high hazard areas. Can you give me an example?
Yes, ma'am. High hazard area could be the train
Okay.
coming through. High hazard area could be the schools.
Okay.
Anything. There's a gas company. The name of the company is slipping my mind right now. Down on Euclid that is considered a high hazard area.
Okay, thank you.
Comments or questions?
Hey, good evening. 19 cadets, I guess, fire the employees you just hired. What are they? Do we have work for them, or what are they doing for all 19 people?
So I'm going to try and give you the exact breakdown of where everybody's at right now because
Okay.
we have them in all different places. So typically when we hire personnel, we like them to have the training beforehand because we're so small. So it's normally like 2 or 3 people. So we don't put them through a class. They already have the training. With hiring such a higher number of people, we were able to hire some people without experience. So we had some that had the Fire 1 and 2 certifications only. We had some that had the EMT certification only. We had some that had both. So out of the 15, we had 6 that have now gone to shift and are on shift and doing their release processes to be released as firefighter EMTs on the shift. And then we have, okay, I'm gonna make sure I get this number right. We have 5 that are in own in-house EMT class that is being taught by one of our paramedics or one of our captains on our shift. He's been moved to day work and teaching EMT class every day, 5 days a week. And then we have 4 that are in Winchester at their fire school, going through their fire 1 and 2 school to get, they were the ones that did not have, they only had EMT. So they're getting their fire 1 and 2 with them. So they accepted, it's great about building relationships with other fire departments. We reach out to them and they say, yeah, sure, we'll help train them. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay.
So as people get trained, there going to be more coming on the shift and that sort of thing.
And then they'll be put on rotation along with the other crew.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And there's still release processes they have to do after they get their certifications, which takes a little bit of time, but that's just more along the lines of, okay, now you have the skills, now we're going to train you how, with those skills of how things are done in this region.
Okay. So is that department staffing level is where you guys need to be? I think we're exceeded expectations, or are you?
So say that again, ask that question again.
The staffing levels, is that where your department needs to be, or are we still short, or are we over the staffing levels?
Depends how you define. So we're at the level now to be able to adequately staff a ladder truck, an engine, and
Okay.
other independent cities usually operate at least 2 ambulances, 2 engines, and 1 ladder. So we're missing the staffing for the extra ambulance and the extra engine. So we're operating at a minimum in terms of being able to staff each vehicle. If you look at Winchester, look at Fredericksburg, Fairfax City has their own fire, right?
Mhm.
Falls Church does not. They outsource to Arlington, Manassas. They all have that base level of service with the 2 medics and 2 engines and the ladder trucks.
Yeah.
So we don't have that, but we at least are making progress by being able to staff ladder trucks.
And is there a need for a second medic?
I think it's certainly for the medic unit. I think that's something the fire department has highlighted due to kind of a lot more activity now and just draining the medics in the medic vehicle. You can comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, as our call volume grows, there's definitely more of a need. I think like for example, in Manassas City, they have 2 medic units right now, and getting ready to. So they're discussing, I think, maybe staffing a 3rd medic unit. So there's definitely, with the call volume increase, there's definitely a need for additional transport units.
Okay. Yeah, something to consider. We have the staff now. I mean, something to look at in the future. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And that's something that our standard of coverage and I'm drawing a blank here, sorry. Strategic plan is it looks at the development plans and stuff in the future of the city and defines, okay, here's the next steps that we need to do to move forward in the growth of the department to make sure it's meeting the community's needs.
Right. Is there an instance where you have one medic out and then there's another call that comes in at the same time?
Yes, it happens frequently with what they call AVL dispatching. It's where they GPS dispatching through Prince William County. So if our unit's out, then it automatically finds the next closest one and brings it to that call.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so in instances, we'll cover a county call,
Yeah.
and then the county will cover ours. But it's a great relationship because the county has a lot of assets that we don't have as a department, so that we get that benefit as well.
But I'm sure the response time would not be as quick as ours.
No, ours is the fastest, except you can make the argument, I guess, the far northwestern part of our city, the Yorkshire Department may be able to get there a little bit quicker, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not,
because they're
not
right
much,
there,
but,
so,
yeah.
All right, thank you.
No follow-up? Comments or questions? Okay. Comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, well, that pretty much concludes the meeting. We have no closed session. Anything for the good of the city? Okay, do we have a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Night.